The manila envelope sat unopened on my coffee table. Harold Finch's elegant script spelling out my name in blue ink. I'd been staring at it for 20 minutes, the painkillers from my latest physical therapy session making the edges blur. 6 months since the climbing accident. 6 months of surgeries, titanium rods, and learning to walk again. And now this. An unexpected delivery from our family lawyer with urgent, private, and confidential stamped across the front. My phone buzzed. With a text from Natalie. "Did you get Harold's package? Call me ASAP." I ignored it, just like I'd been ignoring most of her messages since coming home from the hospital, to discover my life had been quietly dismantled while I was unconscious. The Mitchell Gallery, my mother's legacy that I'd spent the last 5 years managing, now had my sister's name on the letterhead. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The family art collection I'd meticulously cataloged was being reorganized, and the trust fund that was supposed to support my medical bills had mysteriously transferred to a new account I couldn't access. I reached for the envelope, wincing, as my back protested. The doctors said I was healing remarkably well for someone who had fallen 30 feet down a rock face. What they didn't understand was that the physical pain paled compared to the betrayal waiting for me when I woke up. 3 days before my accident, I stood in the Mitchell Gallery surrounded by the final preparations for our biggest exhibition in years. Contemporary Reflections had been my mother's dream project, a showcase of emerging artists she'd discovered before her cancer diagnosis. It had taken me 2 years to bring it to life. The lighting is still wrong on the Webster. Installation, I told Maya, checking items off my clipboard. And we need to move the Sandoval piece closer to the entrance. Mom always said his work needs to be the first thing people see. Maya nodded, making notes. We'd been friends since college, and when I took over the gallery after Mom died, she was the first person I hired. The caterers confirmed for Friday. Edward is handling the wine selection, and Natalie said she'll be here early to help with the final walkthrough. I glanced up, surprised. Natalie's coming? She hasn't set foot in this gallery in months. Maya shrugged. She called yesterday, sounded excited about the opening. That should have been my first warning. My sister hadn't shown interest in our mother's gallery since leaving for design school 8 years ago. Caroline Mitchell had built the collection piece by piece, transforming a small storefront into one of Portland's premier contemporary art spaces. On her deathbed, she'd made me promise to keep her vision alive. The Mitchell Gallery stays in the family, she'd whispered, her once vibrant blue eyes now faded. Promise me, Becca. I had promised. What I didn't know was how difficult keeping that promise would become. My phone rang. Dr. Parker from the research center. I stepped into the back office to take the call. "Rebecca, the grant committee is asking for additional data on the regenerative tissue samples," he said without preamble. "They're meeting next week." I sighed, calculating the hours. Between finalizing the exhibition and completing my research on tissue regeneration after spinal trauma, sleep had become optional. "I'll have it to you by Thursday." That's cutting it close. I know, but the gallery opening is Friday and… Becca, Dr. Parker's voice softened. You can't keep burning the candle at both ends. Your mother wouldn't want you killing yourself to keep her gallery running while also pursuing groundbreaking medical research. "I'm fine," I lied, ignoring the headache that had been my constant companion for weeks. "I'll send the data Thursday morning." After hanging up, I leaned against the desk, the familiar weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. Since Mom's death 2 years ago, I'd balanced my promising research career with running the gallery. Dad had retreated into grief, spending more time at the Coast House than in Portland. Natalie had her design business and her new husband, Greg, a corporate lawyer whose family connections had helped her land contracts with several luxury condo developments. I was the only one left to preserve Caroline Mitchell's legacy. You okay? Maya appeared in the doorway, concern etched across her face. Fine. Just finalizing some research details. I straightened up. Where were we? The Sandoval piece. She hesitated. Becca, I heard Edward talking to Harold Finch yesterday. Something about restructuring the family trust. My stomach tightened. Dad's been talking about estate planning since Mom died. It's nothing. Maya didn't look convinced. They mentioned your name. And Natalie's. It sounded important. I'll talk to him, I promised, knowing I probably wouldn't. Dad and I had maintained a careful dance around financial matters since Mom's passing. He handled the family investments. I handled the gallery. It was the only way we could communicate without reopening wounds. That evening, rather than going home to my apartment, I headed for Forest Park. Rock climbing had become my sanctuary, the one place where the competing pressures of my dual careers fell away. On the cliff face, there was only the next hold, the next move. No gallery budgets, no research deadlines, no family expectations. I sent a quick text to my climbing partner that I'd be going solo on one of the easier routes, just a quick climb to clear my head before returning to the grant data. In retrospect, climbing alone, exhausted, with a splitting headache was the first in a cascade of poor decisions. My last clear memory is reaching for a hold just below the summit, feeling my fingers brush against the rough stone, and then nothing. Nothing until waking up in the hospital 3 days later with titanium rods in my spine and my sister sitting beside my bed, her eyes red-rimmed but her makeup perfect. "You're awake," she whispered, squeezing my hand. "Thank God. Dad's talking to the doctors. You fell almost 30 feet. I tried to speak, but my throat was raw from the breathing tube. Natalie brought a straw to my lips. The exhibition? I managed to rasp. Don't worry about the gallery, she soothed, smoothing my hair back. I've taken care of everything. The opening went beautifully. Everyone was talking about Mom's vision. Relief washed over me, followed immediately by suspicion. Natalie had never shown any interest in Mom's vision. But the morphine was pulling me back under before I could question her further. The next weeks passed in a haze of surgeries, pain, and medication. Dad appeared intermittently, his face haggard, muttering about insurance and specialists. Dr. Parker visited regularly, assuring me my research position would be waiting once I recovered. Maya brought flowers and gallery updates, though her smiles seemed strained. It was 6 weeks before I was lucid enough to ask the right questions. By then, it was too late. "What do you mean Natalie's running the gallery?" I demanded, attempting to sit up in my hospital bed despite the fire racing down my spine. "That's not possible." Maya looked uncomfortable. "There was an emergency board meeting. Your father said with your injuries, the uncertainty of your recovery, the gallery needed direction. I built that exhibition. I've run that gallery, single-handedly for 2 years. I know." Maya wouldn't meet my eyes. Natalie presented a whole new vision for the space. More commercial exhibitions, corporate partnerships. She's already changed the fall schedule. The betrayal hit harder than the ground had when I fell. And the board just agreed to this? Edward supported her proposal. She had Greg draft all the legal documentation. It was very professional. Maya finally looked up. "Becca, there's something else. The Mitchell Family Trust." A nurse entered with my medication, ending the conversation. By the time she left, Maya had to go, promising to return the next day. She never did. Instead, Natalie appeared the following morning, dressed in one of her designer suits, a portfolio tucked under her arm. "How are you feeling?" she asked brightly, setting a smoothie on my tray. "The doctors say you're making excellent progress." I stared at her, this stranger wearing my sister's face. "Why?" She blinked, momentarily thrown. "Why what? Why? Did you take the gallery? You never cared about Mom's work." Natalie's expression softened into something dangerously close to pity. "Becca, be reasonable. You were in a coma. The doctors weren't sure if you'd walk again. The gallery couldn't just sit there with no one at the helm." "I was in a coma for 3 days, not 3 years. You didn't even wait until I was conscious to start taking over." She sat down, crossing her legs primly. "I didn't come here to argue. I came to show you the exciting new direction we're taking. The Mitchell Gallery is going to become a cornerstone of Portland's luxury art market. Greg's connections have already brought in 3 major collectors." My mother's words echoed in my head. "Art isn't about luxury, Rebecca. It's about seeing the world through someone else's eyes. Never forget that." "This isn't what Mom wanted," I said quietly. Natalie's smile hardened. "Mom isn't here, and frankly, her vision wasn't sustainable. The gallery was operating at a loss, Becca. Did you know that?" I hadn't. I'd been so focused on preserving Caroline Mitchell's artistic legacy that I'd delegated the financial oversight to the accountant Dad had recommended. "That's not possible. The sales from the Hernandez collection alone should have..." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Been reinvested in gallery improvements, according to Dad." She opened her portfolio, revealing floor plans for a completely redesigned space. "We're expanding into the adjacent storefront. Higher ceilings, better lighting, a private showing, room for serious buyers." "With what money?" The question came out sharper than I intended. Natalie hesitated, just for a moment. "The trust, of course. Mom's insurance payout, the investments. It's all being channeled into the new vision. The trust that was supposed to support my medical expenses. The trust that I could no longer access." "Get out," I whispered, a cold fury replacing the initial shock. "Don't be dramatic. Get out!" My voice rose, bringing a nurse hurrying into the room. Natalie gathered her portfolio, shaking her head sadly. "You're not thinking clearly. We'll talk when you're feeling better." We didn't talk again until after my discharge, 2 months later. By then, I'd pieced together more of what happened during those critical weeks of my hospitalization. Dad had indeed restructured the family trust, with Harold Finch's assistance, transferring control to Natalie for the duration of Rebecca's incapacity. Except no one had bothered to revisit that arrangement once I regained consciousness. The gallery's artistic direction had been completely overhauled, with my mother's carefully cultivated relationships with emerging artists discarded in favor of safer, more commercial work. Most devastating was discovering that the family art collection, pieces Mom had personally selected, including a small Sandoval she'd bought when the artist was completely unknown, was being sold off piece by piece to fund the gallery renovation. When I finally returned to my apartment, leaning heavily on a walker, the first thing I did was call Harold Finch. "I need to see the trust documents," I told him, not bothering with pleasantries. "All of them, including any changes made while I was hospitalized." There was a long pause. "Rebecca, I understand you're upset. Do you? Do you understand that my sister and father used my accident as an opportunity to steal my inheritance and dismantle everything my mother built? That's a serious accusation." Harold's voice took on the careful tone lawyers reserve for potentially litigious situations. "The restructuring was done according to proper legal procedures. While I was unconscious. Your father acted as your medical proxy. The board voted unanimously. A board consisting of my father, my sister, and her husband. The injustice of it burned in my throat. I want those documents, Harold, today. I'll need authorization from Edward. I'm a beneficiary of that trust. I have a right to see the documentation." My spine throbbed with pain, but I forced myself to stand straighter. "Unless you'd prefer I contact the State Bar Association?" The documents arrived by courier that afternoon. 20 pages of legal jargon that essentially confirmed everything. Control of the trust transferred to Natalie. Gallery ownership restructured with me retaining only a minor stake. And a provision allowing for liquidation of assets for business. Development purposes. My phone rang as I was still processing the betrayal. Dad calling from the coast house. "Maya tells me you're upset," he said, his voice carrying the faint sounds of ocean waves in the background. "You need to understand, Becca. These decisions were made for the good of the family." "The good of the family?" I clutched the phone, so tightly my knuckles whitened. "You gave Natalie control of everything Mom built while I was fighting for my life." "Temporarily," he corrected, "until you recovered." "It's been 5 months, Dad. I'm out of the hospital. I'm recovering. Yet Natalie's still selling off Mom's collection and turning the gallery into some kind of playground for her rich clients." He sighed, the heavy exhalation of a man who believes he's dealing with an unreasonable child. "The gallery was losing money, Rebecca. Your mother's approach was admirable but impractical. Natalie has a business plan, connections through Greg. Mom trusted me with her legacy. And you nearly died." His voice cracked unexpectedly. "Do you have any idea what it was like? Getting that call? Seeing you hooked up to those machines? The doctors saying you might never walk again?" I fell silent, caught off guard by the raw emotion. "I couldn't lose you too," he continued more quietly. "The gallery, the art, none of it matters compared to that. I needed you to focus on healing, not worrying about business." "So you just gave everything to Natalie?" "She stepped up when we needed her. You've always been so independent, so determined to do everything yourself, like your mother." There was a wistfulness in his tone. "Maybe this is for the best. You can focus on your research now. That grant Dr. Parker mentioned." "The grant committee isn't going to wait forever," I cut in. "And I can't exactly return to a lab while I'm still using a walker." "There's enough in your personal account to cover your rent and expenses while you recover," he said dismissively. "Natalie's handling everything else." After we hung up, I sat staring at the trust documents, fury and helplessness warring within me. Physical therapy had drained my energy, but I forced myself to pull out my laptop. If I couldn't walk into the gallery, I could at least access the digital records. Except I couldn't. My login had been deactivated. 3 tries later, a message appeared. "This account has been suspended. Please contact N. Mitchell, Mitchell Gallery, com for assistance." I slammed the laptop shut, wincing as pain shot through my back. 6 years of digital archives, exhibition notes, artist contacts, all my work inaccessible. That night, as I lay awake, my mother's voice seemed to fill the darkness. "The Mitchell Gallery stays in the family." What would she think of what had happened? Of Natalie's vision that was dismantling everything Caroline had built? The next morning, I called Dr. Parker. "I need to come back," I told him, cutting off his greeting. "Part-time, whatever hours I can manage. The tissue regeneration research." "Rebecca," he interrupted gently, "your position is secure, but you can't rush your recovery. The grant committee approved our preliminary findings," I finished. Maya told me, "which means we can move forward with the next phase." There was a pause. "How much do you know about what's happened since your accident?" A chill ran through me. "What do you mean?" He sighed. "I think we should have this conversation in person. Can you come to the center tomorrow?" I agreed, a sense of foreboding settling over me. What else had changed while I was fighting to heal? The answer, delivered in Dr. Parker's cluttered office the next day, was devastating. "Natalie approached the board about redirecting your research funding," he explained, unable to meet my eyes. "She had documentation showing she now controlled the Mitchell family's financial interests, including your portion of the trust that was supplementing the grant." I gripped my walker until my knuckles turned white. And the board agreed? They didn't have much choice. The Mitchell contribution was nearly 40% of the project budget. Where did the money go? Dr. Parker shifted uncomfortably. A new imaging center, state-of-the-art equipment, named after your mother. The Caroline Mitchell Center for Medical Advancement. A plaque my sister could point to at charity galas, showing what a dedicated philanthropist she was, while simultaneously gutting the actual research my mother had believed in. My samples? I asked, already knowing the answer. Transferred to the university facility in Seattle. They're continuing the work, just under different leadership. 5 years of research, my contribution to spinal injury treatment, the work that might have helped patients like me recover faster, gone. Just like the gallery, just like the trust. I see, I said, my voice surprisingly steady as I stood to leave. Thank you for telling me. Rebecca, Dr. Parker called as I reached the door. This isn't right. What they did, taking advantage while you were incapacitated, there must be legal recourse. I turned back. Did you know that my mother's will stipulated the art collection stay intact? That the gallery should continue supporting emerging artists? That my research was to be funded regardless of commercial applications? His expression told me he hadn't. Neither did I continued, until I read the trust documents yesterday. But apparently that didn't matter. Not to my father, not to Harold Finch, and certainly not to my sister. There must be something. I'll figure it out, I said, more to myself than to him. Somehow, as I made my painful way back to my apartment, I cataloged what remained to me. A modest checking account, disability payments that barely covered my physical therapy, and a mind that was finally beginning to clear after months of pain medication. It wasn't much to build a counterattack with, but it would have to be enough. That evening, I received a text from an unfamiliar number. We should talk. About the gallery. About what really happened. Coffee tomorrow? Maya. I hadn't heard from my former assistant since that uncomfortable hospital visit months ago. The message set off warning bells, but I was desperate for allies. Where and when? I texted back. The response came quickly. Courier coffee, 2 p.m., come alone. The next afternoon, I made my way to the small coffee shop, my walker drawing, sympathetic glances from other patrons. Maya was already there, nervously shredding a napkin, her usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. Thank you for coming, she said as I laboriously settled into the chair across from her. I wasn't sure you would. Why did you disappear? I asked bluntly. 5 years working together and suddenly nothing. She looked down. Natalie made it clear my position depended on my loyalty. I have student loans, Becca. I couldn't risk it. Loyalty, I repeated flatly. You mean not talking to me? At first. Then I started noticing things. She lowered her voice. Discrepancies in the sales records. Pieces from your mother's personal collection being moved off-site. Private viewings that weren't documented. My suspicion turned to concern. Maya, what are you saying? I think Natalie and Greg are doing more than just changing the gallery's direction. She pulled a flash drive from her pocket, sliding it across the table. I've been copying files, financial records, emails, inventory changes. It's all there. I stared at the tiny device. Why are you doing this now? Maya's eyes filled with tears. Because last week they sold the Sandoval. Your mother's Sandoval, the one she made me promise would never leave the family collection. The small painting had been one of my mother's most treasured possessions. Acquired when the artist was unknown, it had become exponentially more valuable after his rise to prominence. But its real worth was sentimental. It was the first piece she'd purchased after her own cancer diagnosis, a symbol of her determination to keep building her vision despite her illness. That's impossible, I whispered. The trust specifically protects the core collection. Not anymore. Maya's voice hardened. Natalie had the terms modified again last month. Harold Finch signed off on it. My fingers closed around the flash. Drive. I need to see what's on this. She nodded, already standing to leave. Be careful, Becca. Greg has connections, powerful ones, and Natalie. She hesitated. She's not the person we thought she was. That night, I pored through the files Maya had collected. What emerged was worse than I'd imagined. Systematic. Selling of collection pieces, with funds diverted not just to gallery renovations, but to a separate account in Natalie's name. Email exchanges with collectors that bypassed normal gallery protocols. And most damning, a draft agreement for transferring the gallery's ownership entirely to a new LLC controlled by Natalie and Greg, with only a token payment to the family trust. They weren't just changing my mother's legacy, they were stealing it outright. I was still processing this discovery when a knock came at my door. Painfully, I made my way across the apartment, checking the peephole out of newly developed caution. Harold Finch stood in the hallway, his tall frame stooped with age, a manila envelope clutched in his gnarled hands. When I opened the door, he looked startled, as if he'd expected someone else. Rebecca, you're looking better. What do you want, Harold? My tone made it clear pleasantries weren't welcome. He glanced past me into the apartment. May I come in? This isn't a conversation for hallways. I stepped aside reluctantly, watching as he surveyed my modest living space. Without the trust income, I'd had to give up my larger apartment near the gallery for this smaller unit in a less desirable neighborhood. I understand you've been making inquiries, he said, setting the envelope on my coffee table. About the trust modifications, about the gallery's finances. You mean about how my sister and father stole my inheritance while I was in surgery? I remained standing, despite the pain shooting through my back. Yes, I've been asking questions. Harold's weathered face creased with what appeared to be genuine discomfort. It's more complicated than you realize. Enlighten me. He gestured to the envelope. Before I do, I need you to understand something. I've been your family's attorney for 37 years. I've known you since you were born. What I'm doing right now could end my career. That got my attention. What are you talking about? Your mother left specific instructions, a letter to be delivered to you under certain circumstances. He tapped the envelope. I believe those circumstances have arisen. My heart began to race. What circumstances? The dissolution of her legacy. Harold's voice was barely above a whisper. Caroline made me promise that if the gallery, the collection, or her research funding were ever endangered, I was to give you this. Only you. I stared at the envelope, the same elegant script I'd seen on countless gallery documents spelling out my name in my mother's handwriting. Why now? I demanded, anger flaring. Why not when Natalie first took control, when they started selling the collection? Harold looked away. I wanted to believe they were acting in the family's best interests, that the changes were temporary, as Edward claimed. I was wrong. He stood to leave. Whatever you decide to do with that information is up to you. But I suggest you read it alone. After he left, I sat staring at the envelope, afraid to open it yet unable to ignore it. Finally, gathering my courage, I broke the seal. Inside was a single folded document and a small silver key. My dearest. Rebecca, my mother's familiar handwriting began. If you're reading this, then what I feared has come to pass. The letter trembled in my hands as I continued reading my mother's words. If you're reading this, then what I feared has come to pass. The gallery, the collection, or the research funding has been compromised. I hoped this day would never come, but I've learned that hope is a poor substitute for preparation. When I was diagnosed, I made arrangements that your father and sister know nothing about. A separate trust, documented only between myself and Harold, containing assets that cannot be touched by anyone but you. The key enclosed opens a safe deposit box at First Meridian Bank downtown. Box 413. Inside, you'll find everything you need. Rebecca, I chose you to protect my legacy not because you were the eldest, but because you understood what truly mattered. Not the monetary value of art, but its power to change how we see the world. Not the prestige of medical research, but its potential to ease suffering. Natalie has always been your father's daughter, pragmatic, ambitious, focused on appearances. I love her dearly, but I never trusted her with what I built. Trust yourself. Trust what I've left for you. And remember that sometimes, to protect what matters, you must be willing to fight. All my love always, Mom. I read the letter 3 times, each pass revealing new layers of meaning. My mother had foreseen this betrayal. She had prepared for it. The realization both comforted and devastated me. The silver key felt impossibly heavy in my palm. Whatever awaited me in that safe deposit box represented my mother's final act of protection, a contingency plan created in her last months of life when she should have been focusing on her family, not safeguarding her legacy from them. Despite the late hour and the exhaustion weighing on my limbs, I couldn't wait. I called a rideshare, the driver helping me and my walker into the back seat as I directed him to First Meridian Bank. The night security guard looked skeptical when I explained. I needed access to the safe deposit vault. Ma'am, the vault's closed until morning banking hours, he said, eyeing my walker with thinly veiled impatience. I pulled out my ID and the silver key. This is an emergency. I understand if you need to call a manager. 20 minutes and several phone calls later, I was escorted into the vault by an irritated assistant manager. Box 413 was larger than I expected, positioned near the bottom of the wall of identical metal doors. I'll need privacy, I told the assistant manager as he inserted his master key alongside mine. Bank policy requires... I'm aware of the policy, I interrupted, channeling my mother's boardroom voice. I'm also aware that my mother, Caroline Mitchell, was a significant client of this institution for over 20 years. His resistance crumbled. 10 minutes, he conceded, stepping outside the small viewing room. When I opened the box, I found several neatly organized items, a leather portfolio, a USB drive labeled with my name, a small jewelry box, and an envelope containing what appeared to be legal documents. On top was a handwritten note. Start with the USB drive. Everything else will make sense afterward. CM. I slipped the contents into my bag, my heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Whatever revelations awaited me, I wanted to face them in the privacy of my own apartment. The assistant manager checked his watch pointedly as I emerged. Find what you were looking for? Yes, I replied, though I had no idea what I'd actually found. Thank you for your assistance. Back in my apartment, I plugged the USB drive into my laptop, hands trembling slightly. A single video file appeared on the screen. When I clicked it, my mother's face filled the display. She looked thin but vibrant, her signature red lipstick perfectly applied despite the hollows in her cheeks. This was recorded in her final months, after the treatments had failed but before she became bedridden. Rebecca, she began, her voice strong despite her fragile appearance. If you're watching this, it means the safeguards I put in place have been breached. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to protect what we built together. Tears blurred my vision, but I blinked them away, unwilling to miss a single moment of this unexpected gift. The documents in the box detail a secondary trust I established shortly after my diagnosis. The Caroline Mitchell Private Collection Trust contains several key assets. The original founding documents of the gallery, granting ultimate ownership control to the trust rather than to the family. The intellectual property rights to my collected essays and catalogs, And most importantly, 12 key pieces from my personal collection that were quietly transferred to a secure storage facility. She leaned closer to the camera, her blue eyes so like my own, intense with purpose. These 12 pieces include the Sandoval, the early Hernandez works, and the Martinez sculpture series. They are not merely valuable art, Rebecca. They represent the relationships I built with artists when they were unknown, the vision I had for contemporary art in this city. No one, not your father, not Natalie, not even the gallery board, knows about this separate collection. My breath caught. The Sandoval that Maya said had been sold. How could Natalie have sold something she didn't actually possess? As if reading my thoughts, my mother continued. I arranged for high-quality reproductions of these pieces to remain in the main collection. Only an expert would know the difference. The originals are safe, waiting for the right moment to re-emerge. A small, incredulous laugh escaped me. My meticulous, rule-following mother had created forgeries of her own collection as an insurance policy. The jewelry box contains the access codes and location details for the storage facility. The leather portfolio holds my private journals, documenting the real provenance of each piece, along with my plans for their eventual public display. Rebecca, I'm giving you a choice. You can use these assets to rebuild what may have been lost, or you can reveal the truth and reclaim what was always meant to be yours. The legal documents provide you with the authority to do either. She paused, reaching for something off camera. When her hand reappeared, she was holding a small photograph, me at my college graduation, standing proudly beside one of her early exhibitions. You were always the one who understood that art isn't about possession or prestige. It's about vision, about seeing possibilities others miss. Her smile turned wistful. Whatever you decide, know that I trust you completely. Lead with your heart, but protect yourself with your mind. The video ended, my mother's face freezing on the screen in a final smile. I sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of what she'd left me. Not just art and legal documents, but a choice, a way forward. Power I hadn't realized I possessed. With shaking hands, I opened the jewelry box. Inside was a key card, a small notebook with coordinates and entry codes, and a business card for Artemis Secure Storage Solutions with a handwritten phone number on the back. The leather portfolio contained my mother's private journals, her elegant handwriting, filling page after page with observations about artists, exhibitions, and acquisitions. But interspersed with these professional notes were more personal entries. Edward doesn't understand why I continue acquiring emerging artists when the established names would be better investments. He measures everything in financial terms. Now, I wonder when that happened to the idealistic young man I married. Natalie asked for money again today, another business venture with guaranteed returns. I suggested she apply for a small business loan instead. The resulting argument ended with her accusing me of favoritism toward Rebecca. Perhaps she's right in a way. Rebecca has never asked for anything except the opportunity to earn her place. The doctors have given me an estimate. 6 months, perhaps less. Not enough time to correct all my mistakes, but perhaps enough to protect what matters most. The entries became more focused as her illness progressed, detailing her plan to create the separate trust and secure the most important pieces of her collection. The final entry, dated just 2 weeks before her death, read simply, "All arrangements complete. Rebecca will know what to do when the time comes. I only pray that time is far away." I closed the journal, overwhelmed by this intimate glimpse into my mother's final thoughts. She had foreseen this betrayal, not just by Natalie, but by my father as well. She had prepared a countermove in a game I hadn't even known we were playing. The legal documents confirmed everything. I was the sole trustee of the Caroline Mitchell Private Collection Trust, with complete authority over assets valued at approximately $12 million. A fortune hidden in plain sight, waiting for me to claim it. My phone buzzed with a text from Natalie. "Dad says you're asking questions about the gallery finances. We should talk. Brunch tomorrow? My treat." I stared at the message, anger and vindication warring within me. For months, I'd been powerless, a patient to be managed, an inconvenience to be worked around, an obstacle to be removed from my sister's path. Now, suddenly, I held the keys to a truth that could dismantle everything she'd built on her betrayal. But revealing that truth would mean publicly exposing my family's treachery. It would mean admitting that the Mitchell Gallery, respected throughout the Pacific Northwest art world, had been displaying forgeries. It would mean lawsuits, scandal, the destruction of my mother's public legacy, even as I tried to preserve its essence. I needed more information before deciding my next move. Setting aside the documents, I pulled up Maya's flash drive, diving deeper into the financial records she'd collected. What I found turned my simmering anger cold. This wasn't just about changing the gallery's direction or claiming control while I was incapacitated. The money from the supposed sale of the Sandoval and other key pieces, nearly $5 million, had been funneled through a series of transactions into a new venture, Winter's Design Collective, a luxury interior design firm listing Natalie as CEO and Greg as CFO. They weren't just stealing my inheritance, they were using it to fund Natalie's long-held ambition of breaking into high-end design, leveraging the Mitchell name and connections while quietly dismantling the actual Mitchell legacy. And my father was allowing it. Whether out of grief, indifference, or his own financial interest, he was signing off on every transaction. I texted Maya, "Need to meet. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., not courier coffee, too public, my apartment." Her response came immediately. "I'll be there. Be careful who you trust." Sleep evaded me that night, my mind racing through possible scenarios. By morning, I had formulated the beginnings of a plan, one that required precision, patience, and allies I wasn't sure I had. Maya arrived punctually, a thick file folder tucked under her arm and dark circles under her eyes suggesting she'd slept as poorly as I had. "You look terrible," she said by way of greeting, eyeing my rumpled appearance. "Back at you." I gestured to the coffee I'd prepared. "Lock the door behind you." She raised an eyebrow but complied. "Dramatic much? You're the one who warned me to be careful." I indicated the documents spread across my coffee table. "I found something. Several somethings, actually." As concisely as possible, I explained about Harold's visit, my mother's letter, and the safe deposit box contents, though I left out the location of the secure storage facility and any mention of the art forgeries. Maya might be helping me now, but I wasn't ready to trust anyone completely. "Holy shit," she breathed when I finished. "Your mother was some kind of strategic genius." She was certainly more perceptive than I gave her credit for. I tapped the financial records on my laptop screen. But I need to understand exactly what Natalie and Greg have done. These transfers are complicated. Maya's expression darkened. "That's why I brought this." She opened her file folder, revealing printouts of emails, bank statements, and what appeared to be architectural plans. They're not just using the gallery money for Natalie's design firm. They're planning to convert the gallery space itself. What do you mean? She spread out the architectural drawings. "These were delivered last week. The Mitchell Gallery is going to become the flagship showroom for Winter's Design Collective. They're announcing it at the Spring Gala next month." The Spring Gala, the annual event my mother had established to showcase emerging artists and raise funds for arts education. Now it would serve as the launchpad for my sister's company, built with stolen inheritance and secured by my accident. "Does my father know about this?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Maya pulled out another document, an email. From Edward Mitchell to Greg Winters, dated just 1 week after my accident. "Greg, I've reviewed the proposal for Natalie's design venture. While I'm uncomfortable with the timeline, I recognize that we need to move forward. Rebecca's situation has created an unexpected opportunity to consolidate family resources. I trust you'll handle the legal aspects with appropriate discretion. The gallery rebranding should wait until we're certain about her prognosis. My hands clenched into fists. The physical pain of my still healing spine, nothing compared to this fresh betrayal. They were planning this before I even woke up from surgery. I think they've been planning it longer than that, Maya said quietly. I found other emails dating back months before your accident. Greg was already talking to contractors. Natalie was securing clients. They just needed access to the Capitol and the gallery space, which my accident conveniently provided. The pieces aligned with sickening clarity. The gallery was never losing money, was it? Maya shook her head. No, it was actually becoming more profitable under your management. The losses only started appearing in the books after Natalie took control. Creative accounting to justify the changes. I leaned back, wincing as my back protested. So what's their endgame? Turn the gallery into a design showroom? Sell off my mother's collection piece by piece? And use the proceeds to fund Natalie's company? Pretty much. The Mitchell name still has value in the art world. They're leveraging that for the design business. Most of the collectors don't know or care about your mother's vision. They just want the prestige of the Mitchell connection. I thought of the 12 original pieces secured in my mother's secret storage facility. The ace in the hole she'd provided me, proof not only of Natalie's deception, but of her outright fraud in selling forgeries as originals. But using that proof would destroy the gallery's reputation completely. My mother's legacy would be tarnished by scandal, the very thing she'd worked to prevent. I'm meeting Natalie for brunch tomorrow, I said after a moment of contemplation. She doesn't know what I've discovered. Maya looked alarmed. Is that wise? If she suspects she thinks I'm still the compliant older sister too, focused on recovery to fight back, too proper to make accusations without irrefutable proof. I allowed myself a small, grim smile. Let her keep thinking that, for now. What's your plan? I hesitated. As much as I needed Maya's help, complete transparency felt dangerous. I need more information before I make my next move. Specifically, I need to know who's bought the supposedly original artworks, and I need access to the gallery's current financial accounts. She nodded slowly. I can get you the sales records. The financial access is trickier. They changed all the passwords after you started asking questions. Can you get me into the gallery after hours? Just once? Her eyes widened. They installed a new security system last month. Keycard access only. I pulled out my phone, showing her the calendar invitation that had arrived that morning. Mitchell, Gallery Spring Gala planning meeting, 3 p.m. tomorrow. Natalie sent this by mistake, I explained. It went to all staff, including my old email that they apparently forgot to deactivate. They're meeting at the gallery tomorrow afternoon. So, I'm going to accept the brunch invitation. Play the reconciliation card. Keep her occupied while you access her office computer during the planning meeting. Maya looked skeptical. That's risky. If anyone recognizes you, they won't. I gestured to my walker, my changed appearance. Besides, you said yourself that she's replaced most of the staff, and you'll be there legitimately as gallery assistant. What exactly am I looking for on her computer? Financial transfers, sales records for the Sandoval and other major pieces, communications with buyers. Anything that proves they knowingly misrepresented the gallery's finances or the authenticity of the artwork. Maya ran a hand through her hair, clearly uncomfortable. Becca, if they catch me, they won't. I reached for her hand. Maya, you're the only person I can trust right now. My mother built something beautiful, something that mattered. They're turning it into a showroom for overpriced furniture. She sighed, squeezing my hand before releasing it. Fine. But if I get fired, you'll have a job when I reclaim the gallery, I promised. Better paid than before. After Maya left, I turned my attention to the brunch meeting with Natalie. It would require every ounce of acting ability I possess to sit across from my sister, making small talk while knowing the depth of her betrayal. I chose my outfit carefully, casual enough to suggest I wasn't taking the meeting too seriously, but put together enough to project recovery and confidence. The walker would reinforce her perception of me as physically diminished, which might work to my advantage. That evening, I received another text from Natalie. Looking forward to tomorrow. So much to catch you up on. The gallery is thriving. XO. The casual cruelty of her enthusiasm made my blood boil. I wondered if she even recognized what she was doing as betrayal anymore, or if she justified it so completely that she saw herself as the rightful inheritor of the Mitchell legacy. Forcing my fingers to remain steady, I replied, "Looking forward to it too. Been too long." The next morning dawned bright and clear. One of those perfect Portland spring days that seem designed to showcase the city at its best. I arrived at Veritable Quandary, Natalie's favorite brunch spot, 15 minutes early, positioning myself at a table with a clear view of the entrance. She arrived precisely on time, immaculately dressed in a pale blue suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. Her hair was swept into an elegant updo, diamond studs glinting at her ears. New, I noted. Greg's latest guilt offering? Perhaps. Her smile faltered momentarily when she saw me, the reality of my still evident injuries clearly catching her off guard. Then the perfect mask slipped back into place. "Becca!" She air-kissed my cheeks, careful not to actually make contact. "You look wonderful. The physical therapy must be working miracles." "Slow and steady progress," I replied, gesturing to the walker parked beside the table. "The doctors are optimistic." "That's fantastic." She settled across from me, immediately signaling for a server. "I've ordered us mimosas. We have so much to celebrate." I maintained a neutral expression. "Oh?" "The gallery expansion is ahead of schedule. The spring gala is shaping up to be our biggest event ever. And," she leaned forward conspiratorially, "I've secured the Westlake account for the design firm." The Westlakes were longtime supporters of the gallery, collectors who had purchased several pieces on my mother's recommendation. Now they were apparently Natalie's design clients. "That's wonderful," I managed, taking a sip of water to hide my expression. "I didn't realize you'd launched the design firm already." She waved a dismissive hand. "We're in the soft opening phase. The full launch coincides with the gala. Which reminds me," she reached into her designer handbag, pulling out an embossed invitation. "I want you to be there, front and center, family united and all that." I accepted the invitation, noting the rebranded logo. Mitchell Gallery presents the Winter's Design Collective Launch Gala. "Very nice," I said, setting it aside. "Dad must be thrilled." A flicker of something, annoyance, guilt, crossed her face. "Dad's been distant. The Coast House renovations are taking forever, and you know how he gets when contractors don't meet his standards." Our mimosas arrived, giving me a moment to adjust my approach. I needed to keep her talking, to extract as much information as possible while appearing supportive and oblivious. "Tell me about the expansion," I prompted, raising my glass in a toast. "To your success." She clinked her glass against mine, visibly relaxing as she launched into a detailed description of the gallery renovations. The exhibition space was being reconfigured to showcase room vignettes rather than individual artworks. The office area was expanding to accommodate the design team. The storage facility had been streamlined to make room for fabric and finish samples. "What about Mom's permanent collection?" I asked innocently. The Sandoval looked perfect in the main gallery. Natalie's smile dimmed slightly. "We've had to make some difficult decisions about the collection. The Sandoval, for instance, beautiful piece, of course, but it didn't align with the new aesthetic direction." "So you sold it?" She nodded, sipping her mimosa. To a private collector in Seattle. Very exclusive, very generous offer. Dad agreed it was the right move. I'm surprised, I said mildly. Mom always said that piece would never leave the family. Times change, Becca. Mom's vision was beautiful but impractical. The gallery needs to evolve to survive. Into a design showroom? Her eyes narrowed slightly. Into a multifaceted art space that encompasses both fine art and practical design. It's what the market demands. Our food arrived. Avocado toast for her, eggs Benedict for me. I watched as she arranged her napkin, straightened her silverware, all the little controlling gestures she'd inherited from our father. I've been thinking about returning to work, I said casually. Not full-time, obviously, but perhaps consulting on the gallery programming, for old time's sake. Natalie nearly choked on her toast. Oh, that's not necessary. You should focus on your recovery. The gallery team has everything under control. I've always had a good eye for emerging artists. Mom valued that. Of course she did. Natalie's tone was patronizing. But the gallery's direction has changed, Becca. We're focusing on established names, guaranteed investments. The emerging artist program has been paused. Another piece of my mother's legacy dismantled. The emerging artist exhibitions had been the heart of the Mitchell Gallery, the programming that had established its reputation for discovering new talent. I see. I took a bite of my eggs, giving myself time to control my expression. And the education outreach? The school tours? Streamlined. The corporate euphemism fell easily from her lips. We're allocating resources more strategically now. Eliminated, in other words. The free tours for public school students, the workshops for aspiring young artists, all gone to make way for Natalie's luxury design business. It sounds like you've thought of everything, I said, impressed by my own ability to keep my voice even. Greg must be a tremendous help with the business side. At the mention of her husband, Natalie's expression brightened genuinely. He's been amazing. His business background, his connections, we couldn't have managed the transition without him. I'd love to hear more about the financials sometime, I said as if making casual conversation. The gallery always operated so close to the margin under Mom's direction. It must be satisfying to turn that around. She hesitated, her fork pausing, halfway to her mouth. The financial details are rather complex. Greg handles most of that now. Of course, I smiled reassuringly. I'm just curious about the business model. Combining fine art with interior design seems innovative. The tension in her shoulders eased. It's all about synergy. Art collectors need beautifully designed spaces to showcase their investments. Design clients want curated art pieces to complete their environments. We're creating a one-stop luxury experience and stripping away everything my mother valued in the process. Smart, I nodded. Very forward-thinking. Natalie preened at the praise, launching into a self-congratulatory monologue about her vision for the Mitchell winters. Brand. I let her talk, checking my phone discreetly as the minutes ticked toward 3 p.m. Maya would be entering the gallery office soon, searching for the evidence we needed. I should let you get back to work, I said finally, noticing the time. You mentioned a planning meeting this afternoon? Natalie glanced at her watch, eyes widening. Oh, yes, I should get going. The gala committee waits for no one. She signaled for the check. This was lovely, Becca. We should do it more often. Keep you in the loop. I'd like that. I gathered, my things slowly, making a show of struggling with my walker. Maybe I could stop by the gallery sometime? See the changes firsthand? Of course! Her enthusiasm was clearly forced. Let me know when, and I'll arrange a private tour. Some areas are under construction, so timing is important. In other words, she wanted to control exactly what I saw. I understand. I smiled as she paid the bill, waving away my offer to split it. Good luck with the meeting. She hurried off after a quick, superficial hug, already texting on her phone as she exited the restaurant. I watched her go, counting to 100 before pulling out my own phone to text Maya. She's on her way, running about 10 minutes late. Be careful. The response came back immediately. Already in position. Her office door has a keypad now. Any ideas on the code? I thought for a moment. Despite everything, I knew my sister. Her passwords had always been predictable. Significant dates, favorite numbers. Try 0317, I texted back. Her wedding date. A minute passed, then, no luck. Try 2209, our mother's birthday. Another pause, then, I'm in. Starting file transfer now. I exhaled slowly, relieved yet tense. Text when you're out. Be safe. Settling the remainder of my bill, I made my way slowly outside, deliberately taking longer than necessary with the walker. A rideshare would take me back to my apartment, where I'd wait for Maya's update and plan our next move. As I settled into the car, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Not Maya, but Harold Finch. Rebecca, he said when I answered, his voice tight with urgency. Where are you right now? Heading home. Why? Don't go to your apartment. Come to my office immediately. The tension in his tone set alarm bells ringing. What's happened? Your sister called me this morning asking about your mother's estate documents, specifically if Caroline had established any trusts outside the main family holdings. My blood ran cold. What did you tell her? Nothing, of course. Attorney-client privilege. But the fact that she's asking these questions now, right after my visit to you. You think she suspects something. I think, Harold said carefully, that you may have underestimated Natalie's awareness. She mentioned seeing you this morning and finding you surprisingly well-informed about gallery matters. I glanced out the window, suddenly paranoid. Had our brunch been Natalie's way of assessing what I knew? Had my questions about the finances and the Sandoval tipped my hand? Change of plans, I told the driver, giving him Harold's office address instead. Then back to the phone. I'm on my way. And Harold, I need you to try reaching Maya Santos at the gallery. Tell her to get out now. What have you done, Rebecca? The wariness in his voice was palpable. What my mother would have wanted, I replied, ending the call as the car accelerated through the Portland streets, carrying me toward a confrontation I hadn't planned for but could no longer avoid. Harold Finch's office occupied the top floor of a Victorian-era building in downtown Portland, the kind of space that spoke of old money and discreet legal dealings. The receptionist recognized me immediately, ushering me into his private office despite my lack of appointment. Rebecca. Harold rose from behind his massive oak desk, worry etched into the lines of his face. Thank you for coming so quickly. I maneuvered my walker through the doorway, scanning the room instinctively. Were you able to reach Maya? No answer. He closed the door firmly behind me. I left a message for her to call me urgently. My stomach twisted with anxiety. Tell me exactly what Natalie said. Harold gestured for me to sit, then lowered himself back into his leather chair. She called this morning, ostensibly about routine gallery paperwork, but then she mentioned discovering some irregularities in your mother's estate planning. She asked specifically if Caroline had established any private trusts or separate holdings that weren't disclosed to the family. And I reminded her that my communications with her mother were confidential. She then suggested, quite forcefully, that, as the current gallery director and co-trustee of the family assets, she had a right to complete information. He removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. When I declined again, she said something that concerned me greatly. What? She said, It's interesting that you visited Rebecca yesterday. I wonder what documents you might have shared with her. Then she mentioned speaking with you today and finding you surprisingly knowledgeable about gallery matters you shouldn't have access to. Cold dread settled in my chest. She had me followed. It appears so. Harold's expression was grim. Rebecca, I've known your sister since she was born. She's always been ambitious, perhaps even ruthless in pursuit of her goals. But this level of surveillance suggests she feels genuinely threatened. My phone buzzed with an incoming text. Maya. Had to leave abruptly. N returned early. Got partial data. Meeting place compromised. Will contact when safe. I showed Harold the message, watching his face pale. This is escalating too quickly, he said. We need to be strategic. I already have a strategy, I replied, my voice hardening. I'm going to use the evidence Maya collected, combined with my mother's hidden trust, to reclaim what's rightfully mine. And then what? Your sister and father will fight this with everything they have. The gallery's reputation could be irreparably damaged in a public legal battle. Is that what you want? The question hit closer to home than I wanted to admit. What I want is justice. What I want is to preserve my mother's actual legacy, not the twisted version Natalie's creating. Harold regarded me thoughtfully. There. Maybe a way to achieve that without destroying everything in the process. He turned to his computer, typing rapidly. Let me show you something. He swiveled the monitor toward me. On the screen was a legal document, amendments to the Mitchell Family Trust dated just 3 weeks after my accident. Your father provided me with these amendments for filing, Harold explained. I processed them as required, but I preserved the original documentation as well. I scanned the document, legal jargon swimming before my eyes. What am I looking for? Page 4, paragraph 6, the incapacity clause. I found the section and read aloud. In the event of Rebecca Mitchell's incapacity, temporary or permanent, control of her interests in the Mitchell Family Trust and Mitchell Gallery of Contemporary Art shall transfer to Natalie Mitchell Winters for the duration of said incapacity, with full decision-making authority regarding asset management and business operations. Now look at the signature page, Harold directed. I scrolled down, noticing immediately what he was pointing out. That's not my signature. No, he agreed quietly. It's not. Nor did you ever grant power of attorney to either your father or sister, which means this entire document is fraudulent. The implications hit me like a physical blow. They forged my signature to steal my inheritance. It appears so. Harold's expression was somber. I suspected as much when I saw it, but without proof or your direct challenge, I couldn't refuse to process the documents. But you kept the originals. I did, and I took the liberty of having a handwriting expert examine them unofficially. He confirmed the forgery. I leaned back, my mind racing. This changes everything. This isn't just familial betrayal. It's criminal fraud. Precisely. Harold closed the document and opened another file. Which brings me to a possible approach. Your mother's hidden trust gives you leverage. This forgery gives you legal grounds for action. Together, they provide options beyond a scorched earth policy. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Maya. Safe. Meeting at Simon's apartment in 1 hour. Have the data. Simon. Dr. Parker. Smart choice. My research mentor had no connection to the gallery or my family. Natalie wouldn't think to look for Maya there. I need to go, I told Harold, showing him the message. But first, make me copies of these forgery documents. I want everything you have that proves what they did. As Harold gathered the paperwork, another thought struck me. The gallery's current finances. Where exactly is the money going from these art sales? He hesitated. The official records show proceeds returning to the Mitchell Family Trust, but given what we now suspect, they could be diverting funds anywhere. I tapped my fingers against the walker's hand grip, thinking, Harold, I need one more thing. bank records for Winter's Design Collective, and any other companies Greg or Natalie have established in the last year. That would require a subpoena or a really good lawyer with banking connections, I interrupted. You've been my family's attorney for nearly 4 decades. You must know someone who can get this information discreetly. His expression shifted from reluctance to resolve. I might. But Rebecca, understand what you're asking. Once we start pulling these threads, there's no telling what unravels. Your family stopped being my family the moment they forged my signature to steal my inheritance, I said firmly. Get me those records. Today, if possible. After collecting the copied documents and confirming plans to reconnect later, I headed to Dr. Parker's apartment in the Pearl District. The rideshare driver helped me with the walker again, his sympathetic glance making me wonder how frail I appeared to strangers now. The thought only fueled my determination. Simon's loft apartment reflected his scientific mind. Organized, minimalist, with books as the only visible indulgence. Maya was already there when I arrived, pacing nervously between the kitchen island and living room window. Thank God, she exhaled when Simon let me in. I thought they might be following you too. What happened? I asked, accepting Simon's help to settle onto his sofa. Maya ran a hand through her disheveled hair. I was in Natalie's office copying files when Greg called her. I could hear him through the speakerphone. He said, "She knows something. The lawyer visited her yesterday." Then he mentioned having someone keep an eye on her movements. They had me followed, I confirmed grimly. What else? Natalie cut the meeting short and headed back to the gallery. I barely had time to disconnect the drive and get out through the back entrance before she arrived. Maya pulled a small flash drive from her pocket. I didn't get everything, but I got enough. Simon brought us coffee, his scientific curiosity clearly piqued. Would someone mind explaining what exactly is happening? Maya arrived in quite a state, talking about corporate espionage and family betrayal. I gave him the abbreviated version: my accident, the power grab, the forged documents, my mother's secret trust. His expression grew increasingly troubled as I spoke. I suspected something was wrong when they redirected your research funding, he said when I finished. The explanation never quite added up. But this level of deception... He shook his head. What can I do to help? We need a secure place to review these files. I gestured to the flash drive. Somewhere Natalie and Greg can't trace. Use my laptop, he offered immediately. It's not connected to any cloud services or university networks. Complete privacy. While Simon set up his computer, Maya filled me in on what she'd managed to discover before being interrupted. The Sandoval sale is definitely fraudulent, she confirmed. The paperwork shows it sold to a collector named Lawrence Whitmore for $2, $8 million. But there's no actual record of Whitmore in any art collecting. Circles. The money went through 3 different accounts before landing in the Winter's Design Collective startup fund. A shell buyer, I murmured. They created a fake sale to justify moving the money. Not just the Sandoval, Maya continued. 3 other major pieces supposedly sold to private collectors, all with similar financial trails. Simon returned with his laptop, and Maya inserted the flash drive. The screen filled with folders, financial records, emails, contracts, gallery inventories. Start with the inventory records, I suggested. Let's see exactly what they've done with my mother's collection. The document that appeared made my blood run cold. A spreadsheet titled Mitchell Collection Asset Liquidation Plan listed every significant piece in my mother's collection, with columns for estimated value, liquidation priority, and fund allocation target. They're planning to sell everything, Maya whispered. The entire permanent collection. I scanned the spreadsheet, noting with grim satisfaction that the 12 pieces my mother had secretly removed were all listed as Tier 1 priority for liquidation. the most valuable assets they planned to convert to cash. Look at the fund. Allocation column, Simon pointed. WDC launch, coast property renovation, overseas account. They're dividing the proceeds among several destinations. Overseas account? I leaned closer. That sounds like they're planning to move money out of the country. Maya clicked through to another document, a series of emails between Greg and someone identified only as Cayman Advisor. The messages discussed establishing an offshore holding company for sensitive family assets, beyond the reach of domestic complications. They're hiding money, Maya concluded, planning for contingencies in case someone challenges their control. Someone like me, I added quietly. The deeper we dug, the worse it got. The gallery renovation wasn't just about creating a showroom for Natalie's design business. It was part of a complete corporate restructuring that would effectively dissolve the Mitchell Gallery as a separate entity. The Mitchell name would remain as a brand under the Winters Design Collective umbrella, but all substantive assets would transfer to the new company. My father's involvement was more complex than I'd initially thought. Some emails suggested he was reluctant about certain aspects of the plan, particularly selling my mother's collection. Others showed he'd ultimately acquiesce to every major decision, apparently persuaded by Greg's arguments about financial necessity and securing the family legacy. He's being manipulated, I realized. Dad's always been financially conservative, risk-averse. Greg's playing on his fears about economic instability. Look at this, Simon said, pointing to an email exchange dated just 2 weeks after my accident. Your father asked specifically about your medical care funding. The email from Edward Mitchell read, "Ensure Rebecca's medical expenses are fully covered from the primary trust. Her care is non-negotiable." Greg's response was smoothly reassuring. "Of course, Edward. Rebecca's medical needs are our first priority. The trust restructuring won't affect her care whatsoever." Yet another document showed that my medical expenses had been shifted to my personal health insurance rather than the trust, with only minimal supplementary coverage provided, far less than what my father had apparently intended. They lied to him too, I said softly. The realization didn't excuse my father's actions, but it added another layer to the deception. My phone rang, Harold Finch calling with an update. "I've secured some of the financial information you requested," he said without preamble. "The results are concerning. Are you somewhere secure where we can talk freely?" I put him on speaker, allowing Maya and Simon to hear. "I'm with trusted friends. What did you find?" Winters Design Collective received initial capitalization of approximately $7 million over the past 4 months. The funds originate from sales of Mitchell Gallery assets, though the paper trail has been intentionally obscured. "We found evidence of that here as well," I confirmed. "What you may not have found," Harold continued, "is that 3 days ago, Greg Winters initiated a transfer of $4 million to a holding company in the Cayman Islands. The transfer is pending, scheduled to complete at the end of this week. They're moving the money offshore before the gala announcement," Maya realized. "Once the gallery restructuring is public, they want the cash secured where it can't be easily recovered." "Precisely my conclusion," Harold agreed. "Rebecca, this elevates the situation considerably. We're no longer just talking about family disagreements over inheritance or business direction. This is systematic fraud and likely tax evasion." The weight of this realization settled like lead in my stomach. My sister and brother-in-law weren't just stealing my inheritance. They were potentially committing criminal acts that could result in serious legal consequences. "What are my options?" I asked. "We have several," Harold replied. "The evidence of forgery alone would justify an emergency injunction to freeze all Mitchell family assets pending investigation. Your mother's secret trust gives you standing to challenge their actions regardless of the forged incapacity documents. But before we proceed legally, I strongly suggest attempting one more direct conversation with your father. He may not fully understand what Natalie and Greg are doing. And if he does understand, if he's complicit, Harold's sigh was audible even through the phone. Then we proceed with legal action immediately. But Rebecca, once that process begins, there's no turning back. Your family relationships may never recover. After disconnecting, I sat in silence for several moments, absorbing everything we'd discovered. The scope of the betrayal was staggering, not just taking advantage of my incapacity, but systematic dismantling of my mother's legacy. Fraudulent sales, offshore accounts, and manipulative lies. "What are you going to do?" Maya asked quietly. I straightened my shoulders, ignoring the twinge of pain down my spine. "First, I'm going to visit Artemis Secure Storage and confirm that my mother's key artworks are actually there. Then I'm going to the Coast House to confront my father with everything we've found." "You shouldn't go alone," Simon said, concern evident in his voice. "Not when they're already having you followed." "I agree," Maya added. "Let me come with you, to the storage facility at least." I hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but we need to be careful. If Natalie realizes what we're doing, she already suspects something," Maya pointed out. "That's why she came back to the gallery early. The question is, how much does she know about your mother's secret trust?" "Harold didn't tell her anything, but she's clearly worried about the possibility." I tapped the flash drive thoughtfully. "Let's copy this data and get to the storage facility. I need to know exactly what cards I'm holding before I confront my father." Simon insisted on driving us, claiming his vehicle was less likely to be recognized than a rideshare that could be traced through the app. The storage facility was located in an industrial area on Portland's east side, an unmarked building with security that rivaled most banks. The key card and access codes from the jewelry box granted us entry to a climate-controlled interior, where uniformed staff requested additional identification. "Ms. Mitchell," the facility manager greeted me after verifying my credentials. "We've maintained your mother's collection according to her specific instructions. Would you like to view the items?" "Yes, please." He led us to a private viewing room, then disappeared into the secure storage area. Minutes later, he returned with assistants wheeling in the first of several crates. "The Sandoval, as requested," he announced, carefully removing the protective covering. There it was, my mother's beloved painting, the real Sandoval that had supposedly been sold to a collector in Seattle. The colors were exactly as I remembered, the brushstrokes distinctive and alive in a way no reproduction could capture. "It's authentic," I confirmed, emotion threatening to overwhelm me. "Let's see the others." One by one, the 12 key pieces from my mother's collection appeared, each genuine, each exactly as documented in her private journal. The Martinez sculptures with their distinctive patina, the early Hernandez works with the artist's preliminary signatures, the Yoshida installation pieces with their carefully numbered components. "She really did it," Maya whispered, awe evident in her voice. "Your mother protected the most important pieces, just like she said." "Not just protected them," I corrected, examining the documentation the manager provided. "She established their provenance irrefutably. These certificates, these photographs, they prove these are the authentic works." Which means the pieces Natalie sold were forgeries, Maya finished. "Reproductions passed off as originals. That's art fraud." The implications were staggering. Not only had Natalie and Greg stolen my inheritance, but they'd committed fraud against the buyers of these supposed masterpieces. If those buyers ever discovered they'd purchased elaborate fakes, the scandal would destroy not just the Mitchell Gallery's reputation, but potentially result in criminal charges. "I need copies of all this documentation," I told the facility manager. "Authentication certificates, storage records, everything." While he arranged the copies, Maya pulled me aside. "Becca, this is bigger than we thought. Art fraud at this level, we're talking federal crime territory." "I know. The weight of this knowledge felt crushing. My sister's freedom could be at stake, not just her business ambitions. Despite everything, that realization hit harder than I'd expected. Maybe Harold's right, Maya suggested gently. Talk to your father first. He might not understand the full extent of what's happening. I nodded slowly. That's still the plan. But now I'm bringing evidence he can't possibly dismiss. Armed with proof of both the authentic collection and the fraudulent sales, we left the storage facility. Simon was waiting in the car, his expression tense. Everything all right? I asked as we climbed in. Not sure. He gestured toward his phone. I just got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, no one spoke, but I could hear breathing before they hung up. Probably a wrong number, Maya suggested, though she didn't sound convinced. Maybe. Simon started the car. Or maybe someone's trying to figure out who Rebecca's meeting with. The thought sent a chill through me. Let's not take chances. Drop us at Harold's office. I'll arrange secure transportation to the coast from there. As we drove, I called Harold to update him on what we'd discovered at the storage facility. His reaction confirmed my own assessment. This elevates the situation to potential criminal liability, he said gravely. Rebecca, I must caution you again about confronting your father directly. Perhaps we should involve the proper authorities first. No, I said firmly. He deserves one chance to explain, to make this right before everything explodes. Harold didn't argue further, promising instead to arrange a private car service for the drive to the coast house. The driver is a former client, completely trustworthy. He'll wait while you speak with Edward and bring you back whenever you're ready. Thank you. I hesitated, then added, Harold, if anything happens, if Natalie moves that money offshore before I can stop her, I've taken the liberty of preparing emergency injunction paperwork, he assured me. One call from you and I'll file it immediately. All Mitchell family assets would be frozen pending investigation. The nuclear option. Once triggered, there would be no way to contain the fallout. Legal proceedings, potential criminal charges, public scandal. Everything my mother had built would be tarnished, perhaps irrevocably. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, I said, quietly. After switching to the private car Harold arranged, I settled in for the 90-minute drive to the Oregon coast, the folders of evidence heavy in my lap. Maya had wanted to accompany me, but I insisted on going alone. This confrontation needed to be family only, a last chance for honesty before outside forces took control. The coastal highway wound through towering evergreens, occasionally offering glimpses of the Pacific glittering in the afternoon sun. I tried to prepare what I would say to my father, how I would present the evidence without immediately triggering his defensive pride. No perfect approach emerged. The truth was simply too ugly, the betrayal too complete. The Mitchell Coast House came into view as we rounded the final curve, a sprawling contemporary structure perched on the cliffs, floor-to-ceiling windows facing the ocean. My mother had chosen the location, supervised the construction, insisted on the expansive glass to bring the wild inside, as she'd put it. Wait here, please, I told the driver as he helped me out with the walker. I'm not sure how long this will take. The front door was unlocked, as it always had been during my childhood visits. The familiar scent of cedar and sea air greeted me as I made my way inside, calling out, Dad? It's Rebecca. No answer came. The great room was immaculate, but empty, the kitchen unused. I checked the deck overlooking the ocean, his favorite spot for afternoon contemplation, but found it similarly deserted. Dad? I called again, moving toward his study. The study door stood ajar, papers scattered across the usually pristine desk. A half-empty whiskey glass sat beside an open laptop, emails visible on the screen. I stepped closer, glancing at the subject line of the open message, Urgent Gallery Asset Transfers. The sender was Greg Winters, the timestamp just 3 hours earlier. I shouldn't read my father's private emails. But given everything I'd discovered, privacy seemed a luxury we could no longer afford. I leaned closer, scanning the message. Edward, we need to accelerate the timeline. Rebecca has been asking questions, meeting with Harold. The lawyer clearly shared information he shouldn't have. Natalie is handling the gallery end, but we need your signature on the attached documents, immediately to complete the offshore transfers. If Rebecca challenges the restructuring before these funds are secured, we could lose everything we've built. Call me as soon as you receive this. Attached was a document labeled Final Asset Transfer Authorization, requiring my father's electronic signature to complete the movement of funds to the Cayman Islands account. Had he signed it? I checked the email status, read, but no response sent. The attached document remained unopened. What are you doing? I whirled around to find my father standing in the doorway, his face ashen, his normally impeccable appearance rumpled. He looked older than I remembered, frailer somehow, despite the familiar steel in his gaze. Hello, Dad. I gestured to the laptop. Interesting email from Greg. Something about accelerating offshore transfers before I can challenge. Them? His expression cycled through surprise, anger, and finally a profound weariness. You shouldn't be reading my private correspondence. And you shouldn't have signed forged documents transferring my inheritance to Natalie while I was unconscious. I countered, my voice steadier than I felt. Yet here we are. He moved into the room slowly, lowering himself into his desk chair with the careful movements of a man whose joints protested such basic actions. You don't understand what's happening, Rebecca. I understand perfectly. I dropped the folders of evidence onto his desk with a decisive thud. Forged signatures, fraudulent art sales, hidden offshore accounts. Did I miss anything? His eyes flicked to the folders, then back to my face. Who have you spoken to? Everyone I needed to. Maya, Harold, the manager at Artemis Secure Storage. That last name registered visibly, his eyes widening slightly. So you know about your mother's private collection. I know everything, Dad. The only question remaining is how much you knew. Were you actively participating in fraud, or just conveniently looking the other way while Natalie and Greg dismantled Mom's legacy? He reached for the whiskey glass, his hand trembling slightly. It's more complicated than you think. Then explain it to me. I eased myself into the chair opposite his desk, the walker positioned beside me. Help me understand how forging my signature while I was fighting for my life could possibly be justified. He took a long sip before answering, his gaze drifting to the ocean visible through the windows. After your accident, when the doctors couldn't say if you'd walk again, I panicked. The gallery was struggling financially, had been since your mother died. Natalie presented a plan to integrate it with her design business, create something new and viable. The gallery wasn't struggling, I interrupted. The financial records were manipulated to make it appear that way. Maya found the real numbers. He looked genuinely surprised. That's not possible. I reviewed the reports myself. Reports prepared by Greg, I assume? The same Greg who's now trying to move millions offshore? My father's expression faltered. He said it was standard. Business restructuring. That we needed to protect the family assets from potential litigation. Litigation from whom, Dad? From me? Were you protecting family assets, or hiding them from the rightful heir while she was too injured to fight back? He flinched as if I'd struck him. I never intended to harm you, Rebecca. Your medical care was supposed to be fully covered. Your future secured. By taking away everything Mom entrusted to me, by allowing Natalie to sell forgeries of her most valuable artworks, I leaned forward, forcing him to meet my gaze. Did you know about that part, Dad? That the Sandoval and other pieces Natalie sold were fakes? The color drained from his face. That's not... They can't be fakes. I saw the Sandoval myself before the sale. You saw a high-quality reproduction. The real Sandoval, along with 11 other key pieces, is in secure storage where Mom placed it before she died. She created a separate trust, Dad. She knew something like this might happen. His hands shook as he reached for the top folder, opening it to reveal the storage facility documentation. Caroline did this without telling me? She protected her legacy the only way she could. I softened my tone slightly. Did you even read the documents you signed after my accident? Did you understand what you were allowing Natalie and Greg to do? He shuffled through the papers, disbelief evident in every line of his face. Greg said it was temporary, until you recovered, just streamlining decision-making during a family crisis. And the forgery of my signature? Was that just streamlining, too? His head snapped up. What forgery? I opened the second folder, showing him the trust amendment documents with the fraudulent signature. This isn't my signature, Dad. I never signed this. I never authorized Natalie to take control of my inheritance. He stared at the document, then at me, genuine shock registering in his expression. I didn't. Rebecca, I swear I didn't know. About this. Greg brought me these documents already signed. He said you had agreed to the arrangement from your hospital bed. For the first time since waking up from surgery, I felt a flicker of sympathy for my father. He looked broken, betrayed, much as I had felt these past months. Dad, I said, quietly, Greg and Natalie are committing fraud. They've sold forgeries to unsuspecting collectors. They're attempting to move the proceeds offshore. They've systematically dismantled everything Mom built, and they used your grief and fear to make you complicit. He buried his face in his hands, shoulders slumped in defeat. When he looked up again, the steel had returned to his eyes, not directed at me this time, but burning with a different target. What do we do? He asked simply. In that moment, something shifted between us. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. First, I said, pulling out my phone, we stop that offshore transfer. Then we have a very difficult conversation with Natalie. The drive back to Portland passed in tense silence, my father staring out the window at the darkening coastline while I made necessary calls. First to Harold, authorizing him to file emergency injunctions freezing all Mitchell family assets and the Winters Design Collective accounts. Then to Maya, arranging for her to meet us at Harold's office with the digital evidence. Finally, to Dr. Parker, whose scientific precision would be valuable in documenting the chain of events. I still can't believe it, my father said eventually, his voice rough with emotion. Natalie forging your signature, selling forgeries of your mother's collection, moving money offshore. He shook his head slowly. Where did I go wrong with her? This isn't about your parenting, Dad, I replied, more gently than I'd anticipated. Natalie made her choices, so did Greg. I should have seen it, should have questioned more. His gaze remained fixed on the passing landscape. After your mother died, I just withdrew. Let things happen around me. It was easier than facing reality. The admission surprised me. Edward Mitchell had always projected unwavering confidence, absolute certainty in his decisions. This vulnerable confession revealed how profoundly my mother's death had affected him. Carolyn knew, he continued quietly. She tried to warn me that Natalie was becoming calculating. That's why she left you in charge of the gallery. I should have honored her wishes. You still can, I said, checking my phone as another message from Harold arrived. The injunctions have been filed, all accounts frozen pending investigation. Natalie and Greg won't be able to move any more assets. He nodded grimly. What happens now? We meet with Harold to discuss options. Then we confront Natalie and Greg with what we know. I hesitated, then added, Dad, should prepare yourself. This could result in criminal charges." His shoulders slumped further, but he nodded again. "I understand, and I'll accept whatever responsibility is mine in this mess." That simple statement, more than anything else, convinced me that my father had been manipulated rather than malicious. The Edward Mitchell I knew would never willingly admit fault or accept blame. His pride wouldn't allow it. This broken man beside me was someone new, someone humbled by betrayal. As we neared Portland, my phone rang again. Maya, her voice tight with urgency. "Becca, where are you? How soon can you get to Harold's office?" "About 20 minutes. Why? What's happened?" "Natalie showed up here demanding to see Harold. When his receptionist told her he was unavailable, she completely lost it. Started screaming about injunctions and asset freezes. Security had to escort her out." My stomach clenched. She knows. Someone must have alerted her when the injunction was filed. She kept yelling that you had no right, that she'd destroy the gallery before letting you take it back. Maya lowered her voice. "Becca, she threatened you specifically, said you'd regret interfering. Harold's calling in additional security." "We're on our way," I assured her, ending the call and relaying the situation to my father. His expression hardened. Greg must have sources in the financial sector who alerted him to the freeze. Natalie always lashes out when cornered. She's never been cornered quite like this before. When we arrived at Harold's office building, additional security personnel were visible in the lobby. The receptionist ushered us directly into a conference room where Harold, Maya, and Dr. Parker waited, along with a stern-looking woman I didn't recognize. "Rebecca, Edward," Harold greeted us. "Allow me to introduce Diane Mercer from the District Attorney's White-Collar Crime Division. Given the nature of the evidence we've uncovered, I thought it prudent to bring in the proper authorities." My father stiffened beside me but extended his hand politely. "Ms. Mercer, I assume you're here about my daughter Natalie's activities." Diane Mercer's handshake was brisk, her assessment immediate. "Potentially about several members of your family, Mr. Mitchell. I understand you're prepared to cooperate fully?" "I am." He met her gaze directly. Though until today, I was unaware of most of what had occurred. She gestured to the chairs. "Then let's start from the beginning. Ms. Mitchell, perhaps you could walk us through your discovery of these events." For the next hour, I detailed everything. From waking after surgery to find the gallery under Natalie's control, to discovering the forged documents, to uncovering my mother's secret trust and the authentic art collection. Maya provided the financial evidence she'd gathered, and Dr. Parker confirmed the diversion of my research funding. Throughout my account, my father remained silent, his expression growing more pained with each new revelation. When I finished, he cleared his throat. "I'd like to make a statement," he said formally. "While I was unaware of the signature forgery and fraudulent art sales, I did sign documents transferring gallery control to Natalie during Rebecca's recovery. I failed to adequately verify information Greg Winters provided about the gallery's financial status. These were serious lapses in judgment for which I accept full responsibility." Diane Mercer made notes, her expression neutral. "Mr. Mitchell, did you at any point knowingly participate in transferring assets offshore to avoid potential legal claims?" "No." His answer was immediate. "I was told those accounts were for legitimate business expansion. I never authorized hiding assets." "And the art collection? Were you aware your late wife had secured certain pieces in a separate facility?" He shook his head. "Caroline never told me. Though in retrospect, it explains why she was so calm about certain gallery decisions near the end of her life. She had already protected what mattered most to her." As the questioning continued, my phone buzzed with multiple incoming messages, all from Natalie. The progression was telling. "What have you done? All our accounts are frozen. This is my gallery now. You can't just take it back because you're jealous. Dad's not answering his phone. Where is he? What lies have you told him?" And finally, if you think this is over, you're wrong. I'm going to the gallery. If I can't have it, no one will. I showed the messages to Harold, whose concerned frown deepened. Ms. Mercer, I believe we have a situation developing at the Mitchell Gallery. Natalie Mitchell Winters is making what could be construed as threats. The prosecutor read the messages, then immediately pulled out her phone. I'll have officers meet us there. Mr. Finch, do you have the gallery keys? I do, Maya interjected. Emergency set from when I worked there. Then let's move, Mercer decided. Mr. Mitchell, I'll need you to come along. Your presence might help defuse the situation. The drive to the gallery took place in a small convoy, Mercer's car, followed by Harold's, with Maya riding with me and my father in the private car service. As we approached the Pearl District, flashing police lights became visible outside. The Mitchell Gallery's distinctive facade. That's not good, Maya murmured. 2 police officers stood at the entrance, speaking with a distraught-looking security guard. As we pulled up, I could see that the gallery's front door stood ajar, lights blazing inside despite the late hour. She's already here, my father said grimly. With help from the driver, I maneuvered out with my walker. My back throbbed with the day's accumulated stress and exertion, but adrenaline kept me moving forward. Diane Mercer approached the officers, showing her credentials and speaking in low, urgent tones. Ms. Mitchell, I'm Officer Ramirez, one of the policemen greeted me. We responded to a call from your security monitoring company. The silent alarm was triggered about 20 minutes ago. My sister has an access code, I explained. She wouldn't have triggered the alarm unless she deliberately shut off the main system, Maya finished, which would trigger the backup silent alert. Mercer rejoined us. Officers, this is part of an ongoing investigation into financial crimes connected to this gallery. We have reason to believe evidence may be at risk of destruction. I'm requesting your assistance in securing the premises. The officers nodded, moving to flank the entrance. The security guard reports hearing what sounded like breakage inside, but was instructed not to enter until police arrived. My father stepped forward. That's my daughter in there. Let me speak to her first. Mercer hesitated, then nodded. Mr. Mitchell, you can approach the entrance with Officer Ramirez, but don't enter until we assess the situation. As they moved toward the door, the sound of shattering glass echoed from inside the gallery. My father froze, then called out, Natalie, it's Dad. Let's talk about this. Silence, then her voice, brittle with emotion. There's nothing to talk about. You've chosen sides. You always do. No one's chosen sides, he responded, edging closer to the doorway. We just need to understand what's happening. What's happening? Her laugh held a manic edge. What's happening is Rebecca gets everything, as usual. Mom's favorite, the responsible one, the artistic one, and now she's taking it all away from me. Again. Officer Ramirez gestured for us to stay back as my father continued the conversation, his voice deliberately calm. Natalie, whatever you're doing in there, please stop. This isn't helping your situation. My situation? Glass shattered again. My situation is that my accounts are frozen, my company launch is ruined, and my own father is helping the police arrest me. All because precious Rebecca couldn't stand seeing someone else succeed with what Mom left behind. I moved forward, ignoring Maya's restraining hand on my arm. Natalie, this isn't about success. It's about how you went about getting it. Her silhouette appeared in the gallery entrance, a crystal paperweight from our mother's desk clutched, in her hand like a weapon. Oh, look who's here, the injured princess herself. Her gaze dropped to my walker, her lip curling. Still milking that accident for all it's worth, I see. Ms. Mitchell Winters. Mercer stepped forward, ID visible. I'm from the district attorney's office. I need you to step outside now. Natalie's eyes widened, darting from Mercer to me, to our father. You actually called the police on your own sister? Your own daughter? Her voice rose hysterically. What kind of family does that? The kind whose members forge signatures and sell fake artwork, I replied steadily. The kind whose members try to hide millions in offshore accounts, she threw the paperweight, missing us but shattering against the concrete step. You don't know anything. The gallery was dying under your management. Dad was hemorrhaging money trying to keep Mom's precious vision alive. I saved it. By committing fraud. My father's voice cracked with emotion. By lying to me about where the money was going? By selling forgeries of your mother's collection? That last accusation seemed to hit her physically. She staggered, back a step. That's a lie. The Sandoval was real. All the pieces were real. No, Natalie, I said quietly. Mom created a separate trust. She moved the real artwork to secure storage before she died. What you sold were reproductions. Earthy. Color drained from her face as the implications sank in. That's not possible. Greg verified the authenticity, he said. Greg lied to you too, my father said. Or maybe he knew all along. Where is he now, Natalie? Why isn't he here with you facing this? Her expression shifted from shock to dawning horror. She pulled out her phone with trembling hands, staring at the screen. He's not answering. He was supposed to meet me here. Officer Ramirez took advantage of her distraction to move closer. Ma'am, I need you to step outside now. Everything else can be sorted out down at the station. Wait. She backed up, disappearing into the gallery. I need to... Natalie, don't make this worse, my father pleaded, following the officer into the entrance. Whatever you've done, we can work through it as a family. Maya tugged at my sleeve, pointing to the side of the building. The emergency exit just opened. Someone's leaving. I squinted in the dim light, catching a glimpse of a tall figure hurrying away. Greg, I realized. He was already inside. Mercer immediately alerted the second officer, who took off in pursuit. Inside the gallery, raised voices echoed, my father and Natalie arguing, Officer Ramirez repeatedly ordering her to exit the building. I need to get in there, I told Maya. She'll listen to me. Becca, that's crazy. She just threw a paperweight at us. She's my sister. Despite everything, that simple fact still held meaning. And she's just realized her husband has probably left her to take the fall alone. Before Maya could object further, I moved toward the entrance, my walker scraping against the concrete. Inside, the gallery's main exhibition space was in disarray. Display pedestals toppled, several smaller artworks broken on the floor. Near the back wall, Officer Ramirez stood with his hand on his weapon, facing Natalie, who had backed herself, against the emergency exit door. My father stood between them, hands raised placatingly. Natalie, I called, making my way carefully across the room. It's over. Whatever Greg took from the gallery just now, the police will catch him. Her head whipped toward me, eyes wild. You don't understand. He has the authentication documents, the sales records, everything. Understanding dawned. He's trying to destroy the evidence. He said he was protecting us, she whispered, her carefully maintained facade crumbling. He said no one would ever know about the reproductions, that we'd be long gone before anyone realized. My father turned to Officer Ramirez. Your partner needs to know. Greg Winters likely has documents essential to this investigation, possibly a laptop or external drives. As Ramirez radioed this information, I moved closer to Natalie. How long has he been planning this? The exit strategy if things went wrong? Her laugh was hollow. Since the beginning, apparently. I just didn't know I wasn't part of it. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, designer outfit collecting dust. There's a private plane, charter, scheduled for tonight. He said it was for our weekend getaway. romantic surprise. "Destination?" Mercer asked sharply, having joined us inside. "Cayman Islands." Natalie's voice was flat now, defeated. "Where the money is. Where he is probably headed right now while I'm here taking the blame." Mercer immediately stepped away to make calls, presumably to alert airport security. My father knelt beside Natalie, awkwardly patting her shoulder as she began to cry, harsh, racking sobs that seemed torn from somewhere deep. "I just wanted to matter," she choked out between sobs. "The gallery was always Rebecca's. Mom's legacy was always for her. I wanted something that was mine, something important." "So you took what was mine instead," I said, not accusingly but matter-of-factly. "Greg said we could transform it, make it better, more successful." She wiped at her, tears smearing expensive makeup. "He had all these plans, connections. Said Dad was stuck in the past, you were too idealistic, that the Mitchell name could be something bigger. By selling fake artwork?" The question came from my father, genuine bewilderment in his tone. "I didn't know they were fakes." Her voice hardened slightly. "That was Greg's doing. He brought in an art restorer who made the reproductions, said it was insurance in case anything happened to the originals. I didn't question it. And forging my signature while I was in surgery?" I couldn't keep the edge from my voice on this point. "Was that Greg's idea too?" She wouldn't meet my eyes. "No, that was me. You were supposed to be in recovery for months. We needed to move quickly." A bitter smile twisted her lips. "Funny? Thing is, I practiced your signature for hours to get it right. Just like when we were kids and I wanted to forge notes to get out of school." The reminder of that shared childhood memory, Natalie practicing my handwriting while I reluctantly coached her, sent an unexpected pang through me. We had been close once, allies in navigating our parents' expectations. Officer Ramirez received a radio update, his expression clearing. "Ms. Mercer, they've apprehended Mr. Winters at the private aviation terminal. He had multiple laptops and documents in his possession." Natalie's shoulders slumped further. Of course they caught him. He was always terrible under pressure. She looked up at me, really seeing me for the first time since I'd entered. "What happens now?" Before I could answer, Diane Mercer stepped forward. "Ms. Mitchell Winters, I need to place you under arrest for multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and attempted destruction of evidence. You have the right to remain silent." As Mercer continued reading Miranda rights, my father helped Natalie to her feet. She stood woodenly, all fight gone, nodding mechanically at appropriate intervals. "Can I at least change clothes before—" "Going to jail?" she asked when Mercer finished, gesturing to her designer outfit. "We'll arrange appropriate attire at the station," Mercer replied, not unkindly. "Is there anything you'd like to tell us now that might help your situation? Any cooperation will be noted." Natalie glanced around the gallery, at the destruction she'd caused in her rage, at our father's pained expression, at me leaning on my walker. The offshore account was Greg's idea. I just wanted the design business. A fresh start with the Mitchell name behind it. She paused, then added quietly, "I'm sorry about your signature, Becca, and about the research funding. That was cruel." It wasn't a full apology, not nearly comprehensive enough to cover the betrayal. But it was something. An acknowledgement, at least, of deliberate harm. "I appreciate that," I said simply. As Officer Ramirez led her toward the exit, she stopped briefly beside me. "The real Sandoval. Is it really safe? Mom loved that painting. More than anything." "It's safe," I assured her. "All the important pieces are." She nodded once, a flash of relief crossing her features before the mask of composure returned. Then she was gone, escorted to the waiting police car, my father following to speak with her once more before they took her away. Maya appeared at my side, surveying the damage to the gallery. What a mess, literally and figuratively. "We can rebuild," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "The structure is sound. The most valuable pieces are safe. The rest is just details." "Spoken like Caroline Mitchell's daughter," Harold commented, joining us. "Your mother would be proud of how you've handled this." I wasn't so sure. Proud that I'd protected her legacy? Perhaps. But the fact remained that my sister was headed to jail. My father was broken with guilt, and the Mitchell family name would soon be tarnished by public scandal. It felt like a hollow victory. "What happens with the gallery now?" Maya asked practically. "The injunctions freeze everything temporarily," Harold explained. "Once the criminal investigation stabilizes, we can petition to have the legitimate business assets released from the freeze. Given Edward's cooperation and Rebecca's clear legal standing through Caroline's secret trust, I anticipate that process will move relatively quickly." "And Natalie? Greg?" The questions felt necessary, though part of me didn't want the answers. Harold's expression was grave. "Greg is facing significant federal charges: wire fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy, attempting to flee prosecution. His cooperation might reduce his sentence, but he's looking at substantial prison time. Natalie's situation is more nuanced. She clearly participated in fraudulent activities, but if she continues to cooperate, demonstrates remorse, and makes restitution, she may receive a more lenient sentence. First-time offender considerations apply." "She'll still go to prison," I stated rather than asked. He nodded once. "Almost certainly, though perhaps not for as long as her husband." The reality of it settled over me. My sister in prison, the family publicly disgraced, my father's remaining years shadowed by scandal. This wasn't the justice I'd envisioned when I first discovered the betrayal. It felt messier, sadder, more complicated. My father returned, his face haggard but composed. "They're taking her to central booking. Her attorney will meet her there." He looked around at the damaged gallery, sighing heavily. "I told her we wouldn't abandon her, that regardless of what she's done, she's still family." The simple statement hung in the air between us. Family. Despite everything, that bond remained, damaged, redefined, but not entirely broken. "What do you want to do about the gallery, Dad?" I asked quietly. He considered the question, looking at the space my mother had created, that I had nurtured, that Natalie had tried to transform. "It's your decision, Rebecca. Your mother left it to you for a reason. I won't interfere this time." The responsibility settled on my shoulders, not as a burden now, but as a mantle willingly accepted. First, we restore what was damaged. Then we bring back the original collection from storage. Re-establish the emerging artist program. Honor Mom's vision while finding a way to move forward. He nodded slowly. "And the Mitchell name? After all this becomes public?" I hadn't considered that aspect. How the scandal would affect the gallery's reputation, its standing in the art community. But looking around at the space that had meant so much to my mother, I knew the answer. "The Mitchell Gallery stays the Mitchell Gallery," I said firmly. "We acknowledge what happened, make amends, where possible, and rebuild with complete transparency. No hiding, no pretending." "That won't be easy," Harold cautioned. "The art world can be unforgiving." "Then we'll give them something worth forgiving us for," I replied. "Exceptional exhibitions, genuine commitment to artists, the values my mother established from the beginning." As we spoke, crime scene technicians arrived to document the damage. Diane Mercer returned, informing us that Greg was in custody, multiple incriminating documents in his possession. The immediate crisis was ending, giving way to the longer, more complex process of legal proceedings and reconstruction. Maya helped me to a chair, concern evident as she noted my exhaustion. "You need rest, Becca. This day has been impossible." She wasn't wrong. My back screamed with pain, my emotional reserves completely depleted. Yet somehow, I felt more clarity than I had in months. The path forward wasn't easy, but at least it was visible now. "I'll rest," I promised. "But first, there's something I need to see." With Maya's help, I made my way to the small office at the back of the gallery, my mother's original workspace, later mine, most recently Natalie's. Unlike the exhibition space, this room had been left untouched by my sister's destructive outburst. On the wall hung a single photograph, my mother at the gallery's opening 15 years earlier, her smile radiant as she cut the ribbon. Beside her stood a younger version of my father, his pride evident even then. And flanking them, Natalie and I as teenagers, awkwardly formal in dresses we'd complained about wearing. I touched the frame gently, remembering that day. How excited my mother had been, how she'd insisted both her daughters be part of the ceremony despite our adolescent reluctance. "This gallery is our family's legacy," she'd told us. "Something we're building together." Somewhere along the way, we'd lost sight of that togetherness. My mother's illness, my dedication to both research and the gallery, Natalie's growing resentment, my father's withdrawal after his wife's death, all of it had fractured what was once solid. "We can put that in storage if it's too difficult," Maya suggested, misinterpreting my silence. "No," I said firmly. "It stays, to remind us of where we started. And maybe eventually to show us a way back to something like it again." My father appeared in the doorway, his expression softening at the sight of the photograph. "I remember that day. Caroline was so nervous the ribbon wouldn't cut properly, practiced with those giant scissors for hours. The shared memory hung between us, not healing the wounds completely, but offering a glimpse of connection that had been absent for too long." "Dad," I said quietly, "we have a lot to figure out. Legal issues, gallery reconstruction, public statements. But first, I think we both need rest." He nodded, suddenly looking every one of his 70 years. "You'll stay at the house tonight? I don't think either of us should be alone." The invitation surprised me. The family home I hadn't visited since before my accident, the space filled with memories of both happiness and loss. It would be painful, but perhaps necessary. "All right," I agreed. "But tomorrow, we start rebuilding. Everything." As we prepared to leave, securing the gallery as best we could with its damaged entrance, I found myself returning to that photograph, one last time. 4 Mitchells at the beginning of a shared dream, before illness and grief and betrayal had rewritten our story. We would never be that family again. Too much had happened, too many lines crossed. But perhaps, from the wreckage of what we'd been, something new could emerge. Something more honest, more resilient, built on hard truths rather than comfortable illusions. Outside, the Portland night had turned cool and clear, stars visible, despite the city lights. My father helped me into the waiting car, then paused before joining me. "Your mother would be proud of you," he said simply. "Not just for saving the gallery, but for how you did it. With integrity, with compassion, even when it wasn't deserved." The words caught me off guard, emotion welling up unexpectedly. "I hope so. I know so." He settled into the seat beside me as the car pulled away from the gallery, damaged but standing, much like the Mitchell family itself. Tomorrow would bring police statements, lawyer meetings, difficult decisions about Natalie's legal defense, plans for the gallery's restoration. The path ahead was neither clear nor easy. But for the first time since waking in that hospital bed, I felt something like hope. Not just for my own recovery, but for the possibility of healing something larger than myself. The family lawyer's envelope had indeed changed everything, though not in the way I'd expected when I first broke its seal. It hadn't simply returned what was stolen from me. It had revealed deeper truths, forced necessary confrontations, initiated painful but essential transformations. As we drove through the quiet streets toward the Mitchell family home, I found myself thinking not of what had been lost, but of what might yet be salvaged from the gallery, from my research, from the broken pieces of our family. Not the same as before, but perhaps eventually something equally valuable in its own way. 6 months after that fateful night at the gallery, I stood before the Mitchell collection, now properly displayed once again in the renovated main exhibition space. The 12 key pieces my mother had protected formed the centerpiece. The Sandoval in its rightful place of honor, the Martinez sculptures arranged precisely as she had originally intended, the early Hernandez works showcased with the reverence they deserved. My walker was gone now, replaced by a sleek carbon fiber cane that I used mainly on days when fatigue made my newly healed spine protest. Dr. Parker had called my recovery remarkable. I considered it merely adequate, a work in progress like so many things in my life. "It looks right again," Maya observed, joining me in front of the Sandoval. As gallery director, a position she'd initially resisted accepting until I convinced her she was the perfect choice, she had overseen much of the restoration work while I focused on legal matters and my continued physical therapy. "It does," I agreed. Mom would approve. The Mitchell Gallery's reopening exhibition was scheduled for the following evening. A carefully curated showcase titled Authenticity, featuring both established and emerging artists exploring themes of truth, forgery, and restoration. The irony wasn't lost on anyone familiar with recent events, but we had decided early on to face the scandal directly rather than trying to minimize it. "Final RSVPs are strong," Maya reported, consulting her tablet. "Several major collectors confirmed today, including the Hargroves and Diane Wilson. Even the Westlakes are coming." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? After everything?" Apparently, they're intrigued by our bold transparency. Their words, not mine. She smiled slightly. Also, Harold's statement about making restitution to anyone who purchased misrepresented artwork seems to have reassured the collecting community. That had been one of our first decisions after the dust settled, establishing a fund to compensate buyers who had purchased forgeries, funded primarily by recovering the offshore assets Greg had attempted to hide. Harold had crafted a masterful public statement acknowledging the fraud while clearly distinguishing between the guilty parties and the gallery's new direction. The art world's memory was long, but its appetite for redemption narratives surprisingly robust. "Any word from the sentencing hearing?" Maya asked carefully. I checked my watch. "Should be finishing up now. Dad promised to call as soon as it's over." The criminal proceedings against Natalie and Greg had moved with unexpected swiftness. Their cases separated early when it became clear their defense strategies would diverge. Greg, facing the more serious charges and substantial evidence, had eventually accepted a plea deal, 15 years for fraud, tax evasion, and attempted flight to avoid prosecution. Natalie's situation had proven more complex. She had cooperated fully after her arrest, providing detailed information about the fraud scheme while accepting responsibility for her direct actions. Her testimony had been crucial in recovering additional assets Greg had hidden. "Ms. Mitchell," one of the installation technicians approached hesitantly. "We're ready to adjust the lighting whenever you'd like to review it." "Give us 15 minutes, I replied. "Then we'll do a full walkthrough." As he left, my phone rang, my father's number appearing on the screen. I stepped away from the exhibition space, finding a quiet corner to take the call. "Dad? How did it go?" His voice came through tired but relieved. 5 years, with possibility of parole after serving 18 months. The judge took her cooperation into account, and the character witnesses helped. I exhaled slowly. 5 years. Significantly less than what could have been imposed, but still a substantial sentence. How did she take it? With dignity, he said softly. She stood very straight, thanked the judge for acknowledging her cooperation, asked to address the court briefly. What did she say? That she was sorry, that she had betrayed not just the family business but the family itself, that she hoped someday to make amends. He paused. She asked specifically if you were there. A familiar knot of complicated emotions tightened in my chest. I had the final walkthrough for tomorrow's opening. I told her. She understood. His tone held no judgment, for which I was grateful. My relationship with Natalie remained fractured, our limited interactions formal and tense despite tentative steps toward some form of reconciliation. She asked me to give you a message. What message? Tell Becca the Sandoval looks better in its original spot anyway. Mom was right. He cleared his throat. She saw the gallery restoration photos I brought last visit. The simple observation, so specifically about the painting, about our mother's judgment, hit unexpectedly hard. It was the most personal comment Natalie had directed to me since her arrest, the first that hinted at the sister I'd once known, rather than the defensive stranger she'd become. Thank you for telling me, I managed. Will you be home for dinner? He asked, changing the subject with characteristic Mitchell family avoidance of emotional complexity. Late. We have the final lighting adjustments, then security protocol reviews. I'll keep something warm. The ease with which he said this still surprised me sometimes. This new version of Edward Mitchell who prepared meals, who waited up, who had become unexpectedly attentive in his late-life role as my roommate. We had sold the Coast House to help fund the restitution payments, my father moving into the family home I'd reclaimed after sorting out the legal tangles. The arrangement had begun as practical. My continuing recovery, his need to downsize, but had evolved into something neither of us had anticipated. A genuine reconnection, tentative at first, but strengthening with each honest conversation about the past. After ending the call, I returned to find Maya supervising the adjustment of a display case containing original gallery documents, my mother's founding vision statement, early exhibition catalogs, and a small selection of her personal notes about artists she'd championed. Everything okay? She asked, noting my expression. Natalie got 5 years, possible parole after 18 months. She nodded, absorbing the information. That seems fair, I guess. All things considered. Yeah, I studied the documents in the case, my mother's elegant handwriting mapping out her dreams for the space we now stood in. She sent a message about the Sandoval, said it looks better in its original location. Maya raised an eyebrow. That's almost normal. For sisters, I mean. Almost. I smiled slightly. Ready for the lighting walkthrough? The next? Several hours passed in careful adjustments and final preparations. By the time we finished, evening had settled over Portland, the gallery windows reflecting our movements against the darkened street outside. The space looked magnificent, renewed, and authentic in a way that honored its history while acknowledging the painful recent past. We did it, Maya said as we locked up, satisfaction evident in her voice. From complete disaster to this in 6 months. Not bad. We had help. I gestured to her tablet where the staff list remained visible. Harold's legal team, Simon's, organizational assistants, even my father's unexpected talent for navigating insurance claims. Turns out when you're honest about needing support, people step up. Speaking of support, she hesitated. Have you decided about Dr. Parker's research proposal? The deadline's next week. The question touched on what remained my most difficult. Decision. Shortly after the legal situation stabilized, Simon had approached me with an unexpected opportunity. Joint leadership of a new spinal injury research initiative, combining my tissue regeneration work with emerging therapeutic approaches. The timing was perfect for my career advancement, but accepting would mean dividing my attention just as the gallery was being re-established. I'm still weighing options, I admitted as we walked toward our cars. The gallery needs consistent leadership right now, but the research is groundbreaking, potentially life-changing for patients like me. You know my vote, Maya said, unlocking her car. The gallery's in good hands, and you deserve to reclaim your research career too. You don't have to choose just one path. Her confidence warmed. Me, though, the decision remained complex. I'll let you know tomorrow, after the opening. Driving home through familiar streets, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past year. From awakening in the hospital to discovering betrayal, from fighting to reclaim my inheritance, to rebuilding both the gallery and my relationship with my father. None of it had unfolded as I might have predicted or wished, yet the outcome contained unexpected gifts amid the undeniable losses. The Mitchell family home glowed with welcoming light as I pulled into the driveway. Through the front window, I could see my father in the kitchen, moving with the deliberate care of someone who had come to cooking late in life, but approached it with characteristic Mitchell determination. He looked up as I entered, gesturing to a pot simmering on the stove. "Beef stew, your mother's recipe, though I suspect I've forgotten something essential." "Smells perfect," I assured him, settling at the kitchen island where he'd already set places for us, casual earthenware rather than the formal china he'd always insisted upon when my mother was alive. Another small evolution. "How's the gallery?" he asked, serving the stew with careful concentration. "Ready. Everything's exactly where it should be." He nodded, satisfied. "Caroline would be pleased." After a moment, he added more hesitantly, "I visited her grave yesterday. Told her about Natalie's sentencing, about the gallery reopening. I think she would understand what we've tried to do." These visits to my mother's grave were a recent development, part of my father's ongoing effort to process grief he'd previously channeled into work and rigid routine. I found them touching, though I rarely accompanied him, preferring to connect with my mother's memory through her art and journals rather than at her burial site. "I found something in the attic today," he continued, sliding an envelope across the counter. It was in a box of Caroline's personal papers I hadn't reviewed yet. The envelope bore my name in my mother's handwriting, the paper yellowed with age. "What is it?" I didn't open it. He sat across from me, his expression gentle. But the date on the back suggests she wrote it about a year before her diagnosis, long before any of this. I turned the envelope over, noting the date. Nearly 7 years ago, when I was still finishing my medical research training, when Natalie was beginning her second attempt at graduate school, when our family still seemed whole and uncomplicated. "Thank you for finding this," I said, tucking it beside my plate. Some messages needed privacy, and I'd learned to trust my instincts about when to share and when to protect vulnerable spaces. We ate companionably, discussing practical matters, final details for the opening, Harold's updates on the restitution fund, my father's planned visits to Natalie once she was settled in the minimum security facility where she'd serve her sentence. The conversations flowed more easily now, months of shared meals having worn smooth the jagged edges of past hurts. Later, in the quietness of what had once been my childhood bedroom, I finally opened my mother's letter. The paper crackled as I unfolded it, her distinctive scent, the lavender hand cream she'd always used, somehow still lingering after all these years. "My dearest Rebecca," it began, the familiar greeting bringing an immediate tightness to my throat. "I'm writing this after watching you present your research findings at the university symposium. Your passion when discussing tissue regeneration, your careful attention to both scientific detail and human application. I recognized myself in you today. Not in the specific talents, which are uniquely yours, but in the devotion to something that matters deeply. Your father doesn't understand this kind of dedication. He values achievement, results, concrete evidence of success. I've always valued the journey, the pursuit itself, the willingness to pour oneself into something meaningful regardless of outcome. You have inherited this perspective, I think, though you balance it with a pragmatism I sometimes lack. I'm writing because I see challenging times ahead for our family. Natalie is struggling to find her path, increasingly resentful of your clarity of purpose. Your father and I disagree fundamentally about the gallery's direction. He's seeing it as a business to be optimized, I as a mission to be protected. You will likely find yourself caught between these tensions, Rebecca. The responsible daughter, the mediator, the one who understands both art and science, emotion and logic. It's an unfair position, one I've unintentionally helped create by relying on your steadiness. Whatever happens in the years ahead, remember this. Your worth isn't measured by what you preserve or protect for others. Your life isn't valuable, primarily as a vessel for carrying forward my vision or balancing your father's practicality or compensating for your sister's uncertainties. You matter for yourself, your mind, your heart, your unique way of seeing. If a time comes when you must choose between honoring others' expectations and honoring your own truth, choose yourself. I will never love you less for it. The gallery, the art collection, the family name. These are important but ultimately just settings for the real work of living authentically. Whatever becomes of them, your integrity matters more. With boundless love and admiration, Mom. I sat motionless after reading, the letter trembling slightly in my hands. 7 years ago, my mother had somehow seen the fault lines that would eventually fracture our family. She had recognized the roles we were all playing. My father, the pragmatic businessman, Natalie, the resentful younger daughter, me, the responsible mediator, and had tried, in her way, to release me from obligations she feared might become burdens. Choose yourself, she had written. Long before her illness, before the hidden trust, before the contingency plans to protect her collection, she had wanted me to know that my value transcended my role as guardian of her legacy. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had spent the past year fighting desperately to reclaim and protect exactly what she had given me permission to release if necessary. Yet, as I refolded the letter, I realized my battle hadn't really been about the gallery or the art collection, not at its core. It had been about justice, about truth, about refusing to let betrayal stand unchallenged. The outcome, returning the Mitchell Gallery to its original vision, aligned with my mother's wishes, but the motivation had been my own integrity rather than obligation to her memory. Perhaps that was exactly what she had hoped for. The realization brought unexpected clarity to the decision I'd been struggling with. The research position with Dr. Parker wasn't a betrayal of my responsibilities to the gallery, but an honoring of my complete self. The scientist as well as the art curator, the healer as well as the preserver. I reached for my phone, texting, Maya, I'm accepting the research position. We'll work out a balanced schedule for the gallery. You were right. I don't have to choose just one path. Her response came immediately. About time. Simon will be thrilled. So am I. See you tomorrow for the big opening. Sleep came easily that night, my mother's letter resting on the bedside table beside the final checklist for the gallery opening. For the first time in many months, I felt neither torn between competing demands nor crushed beneath the weight of betrayal and its aftermath. Instead, a quiet certainty had settled over me. Not that everything was resolved, but that I was finally approaching life's complexities with my full, authentic self, rather than from a position of defensive reaction. Morning brought final preparations for the evening's gallery opening. My father insisted on accompanying me, dressed in a new suit rather than the conservatively expensive ones he'd favored throughout his business career. His silver hair was freshly trimmed, his posture more relaxed than I'd seen in years. You look nice, I told him as we left. Different. He smiled slightly, adjusting his blue tie, my mother's favorite color. I feel different. Less concerned with appearances, perhaps. Growth looks good on you, I said lightly, though the observation was genuine. Edward Mitchell at 73 was becoming someone new, still recognizably himself with his precision and attention to detail, but softer at the edges, more willing to acknowledge mistakes and adapt his thinking. The gallery hummed with anticipation when we arrived. Maya was already directing the catering staff, exhibition lighting adjusted to perfection, security positioned discreetly at key points. Harold Finch arrived early, accompanied by Diane Mercer, whose professional interest in the case had evolved into personal support for the gallery's resurrection. "The art world loves nothing more than redemption," Harold observed as we surveyed the space, "especially when it comes with a compelling narrative." "Is that what we're offering? Redemption?" I asked. "Authenticity," he corrected. "In the art in acknowledging what happened, in the way forward. That's far more valuable." Guests began arriving precisely at 7, the Portland arts community turning out in force. Collectors, critics, museum directors, artists whose careers my mother had helped launch. Many offered condolences about Natalie's sentencing, which had made the morning news. Others asked careful questions about the gallery's future plans, the status of the restitution fund, whether any of the forgeries would be displayed as educational exhibits. They would not. Dr. Parker arrived with several colleagues from the research center. His presence a pointed reminder of the dual path I was choosing. "I got your email," he said, embracing me warmly. "We'll make it work, the research and the gallery." "I know we will," I agreed with newfound confidence. As the evening progressed, I found myself drawn repeatedly to the Sandoval, its vibrant colors and distinctive brushwork a touchstone amid the social currents swirling through the gallery. My mother had recognized the artist's talent before anyone else, investing in his work when conventional wisdom deemed it unmarketable. Her vision had been vindicated many times over as his reputation grew. "She always said it was her favorite," my father commented, joining me before the painting, champagne flute in hand. Not because it appreciated in value, but because it represented a risk taken purely on instinct. Caroline trusted her eye more than any expert opinion. "She was right about a lot of things," I said quietly. "Yes." He studied the painting thoughtfully, including which daughter should guard her legacy. After a moment, he added, "I received a letter from Natalie today. She asked me to share a portion with you, if it seemed appropriate." "What did she write?" He pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket, finding the relevant passage. She said, "Tell Becca I understand now why Mom chose her for the gallery. It wasn't favoritism or because she was older. It was because she saw the art the way Mom did, not as assets or status symbols, but as connections to something larger. I never had that vision. I saw only what things were worth, not what they meant. That's why I failed, even before the fraud and forgery. I didn't love what I was trying to possess." The words struck deep, revealing an insight I hadn't expected from my sister. Perhaps her time awaiting sentencing had brought genuine reflection rather than merely strategic cooperation. "Thank you for sharing that," I said, returning my gaze to the Sandoval. "Maybe eventually." I didn't complete the thought, but my father nodded understanding. Eventually, after sentences were served and more time passed, perhaps some new form of relationship with Natalie might be possible. Not restoration of what was broken, that seemed an unrealistic expectation, but something different, built on painful truths rather than comfortable illusions. The evening continued, a success by any measure. Critics praised the exhibition. Collectors expressed renewed confidence in the Mitchell Gallery's future, and several emerging artists received exactly the kind of attention my mother had always intended this space to generate. Near midnight, as the final guests departed, Maya found me in my mother's former office, now mine again, taking a moment of quiet amid the evening's sociability. "We did it," she said, collapsing into a chair. "First milestone achieved. The Mitchell Gallery is officially back. Thanks to you, I acknowledged. I couldn't have managed all this while handling the legal aftermath. Team effort. She kicked off her heels with a sigh of relief. Though I have to say, gallery director looks better on my resume than assistant who helped expose massive art fraud. I laughed, the sound echoing in the quiet room. Fair point. Your father seems different, she observed. More present. He is. We both are. I glanced at the family photograph still hanging on the wall, the ribbon-cutting ceremony from years ago, all of us formally posed but genuinely connected in that moment. Loss has a way of clarifying what matters. Speaking of clarity, Maya, straighten slightly. There's something I've been meaning to tell you. I've been offered a position at the Seattle Art Museum, Senior Curator, Contemporary Collections. The announcement caught me by surprise, though perhaps it shouldn't have. Maya's talents had always deserved a larger platform than gallery assistant. That's incredible. When would you start? That's just it. I turned it down. She met my questioning look with a small smile. What we're building here matters more. The Mitchell Gallery's rebirth, the Emerging Artist Program, the educational initiatives we've discussed. I want to be part of that. Her choice moved me deeply. Not just the decision itself, but the reminder that amid all the betrayal and loss, new loyalties had formed, unexpected alliances strengthened. The gallery would be diminished without you, I said simply. But I want you to know the offer reflects what I've always seen in you. You're extraordinary, Maya. So dramatic, she deflected, though her expression showed she appreciated the sentiment. Anyway, it's late. Your father's waiting in the main gallery. Says he'll drive you home when you're ready. After she left, I took a final moment alone in the office, looking at everything we'd restored and reimagined over these difficult months. The gallery felt right again, not exactly as it had been before my accident, but authentic to my mother's vision while simultaneously becoming something new. My phone buzzed with a text, an unexpected name appearing on the screen. Natalie, using her one permitted phone message for the day, heard the opening was successful. Proud of what you've done with the gallery. Take care of Dad. Brief, careful, but genuinely supportive. I wrote back a simple response. Thank you. We'll visit soon. As I prepared to join my father and leave for the night, I paused at my desk, opening the drawer where I kept my mother's letter. Her words resonated differently now, after the successful gallery opening, after accepting the research position, after receiving Natalie's unexpected message. Choose yourself, she had written. And somehow, through all the pain and struggle of the past year, I had found a way to do exactly that. Not by abandoning her legacy, but by embracing it on my own terms, alongside my research work, my healing body, my evolving relationships. The Mitchell Gallery would continue, transformed by truth rather than destroyed by it. My research would advance, potentially helping others with spinal injuries like mine. My father was finding his way toward a different kind of late-life purpose. Even Natalie, despite the consequences she now faced, seemed to be discovering hard-won insights about herself. None of us were the same people who had stood in that long-ago photograph. Pain, betrayal, and loss had changed us all. Yet something essential remained. A capacity for growth, for honesty, for finding new ways forward when old paths became impassable. I switched off the office light and walked through the darkened gallery, past the Sandoval and the other pieces my mother had protected toward where my father waited patiently by the entrance. Together we would drive home, to the house where we were both learning to live authentically rather than according to rigid expectations or comfortable denial. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, balancing research and gallery responsibilities, navigating the ongoing legal aftermath, continuing my physical recovery. But for tonight, I could acknowledge with quiet satisfaction that the journey begun with that devastating letter about my inheritance had led, through unexpected turns, to something resembling peace. Not perfect resolution. Life rarely offered such neat conclusions, but a hard-won equilibrium built on truth rather than deception, on conscious choice rather than obligation, on authenticity rather than appearance. The family lawyer's envelope had indeed changed everything, though in ways none of us could have anticipated when its contents first shattered my world. From those broken pieces, something valuable had emerged. Not a restoration of what was lost, but the creation of something equally meaningful in its own way. As we left the gallery, locking the doors behind us, I glanced back one last time at the illuminated sign above the entrance. Mitchell Gallery of Contemporary Art. My mother's vision, my inheritance, my choice to protect and evolve rather than simply possess. In the end, perhaps that was the most authentic legacy of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.